Okay, good. So
Yeah.
now we can let everyone else know when they come in that we're recording and we are on Facebook. So as we begin to admit people as a courtesy, let's tell them that they have the potential to be broadcast to our Facebook page right now, because we are live streaming this and we're also recording. So that should be something that we let everybody know. Claire, do you want to go ahead and since this is going on to the Facebook page, tell everyone out there that could be listening what we're doing today and why they're seeing us?
Yeah, and should we start to admit people? Up to you.
Sure. At this point, why not? Since we're already on Facebook.
Okay.
I love people's backgrounds.
Yeah, they're great.
I know.
Well,
you have an interesting background there.
I know this is Bodie, as in Bodie Blue Books, and Bodie likes to come to meetings.
I think I remember Bodie from the last time we were in a Zoom together, Janet.
There's just something about
you, and you know what it is, it's that you're not paying attention to him.
Well, yes.
That's part of it.
So welcome everyone who's here so far. Just so you know, we are live streamed to Facebook and we're recording. So put on your best smiles, unless you're wanted by the FBI, and then you should probably turn your camera off.
Oops, better get that mouse. Yeah. I think if you're wanted by the FBI, then they're not telling you you're wanted. That's part of the problem, I think.
Right.
Okay, we have people coming in. That's great.
Yeah.
There's 10 of us so far.
There are quite a few registrants, so this will be nice.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that we still can't, that it's not working out very well to meet in person.
Yeah. I mean, I sent out a poll about this, and basically people don't want to get in their cars. And as wonderful as it was to meet with people at Left Coast Crime and VoucherCon, I mean, people were giddy. I mean, but I don't know about the future of live events. I'm just not sure. Based on, I was embarrassed. I had to call the Rockridge Library and say, we can't do this because.
Yeah, well, we want to make it open to everyone and inclusive, and it's good information that we're going to be offering on self-publishing and self-editing. So it's nice that we're able to be more inclusive. I've had a couple of emails come to me saying that they're very happy that we've gone virtual, because one's in Aptos,
other places
in California.
Yeah.
So so that makes it nice.
Yeah.
And we still get to see smiling faces and visit and talk with like-minded people. So it's not a complete loss.
No.
Plus, I, even knowing for attribution on Facebook and recording, I'm going to tell you guys all right now, this is my pajama sweater. So
it's an attractive pajama sweater.
Thank you. So perfectly happy with this ability to meet all of my friends here and see everyone and still be in my pajamas. So that's me. Hello, Laurie King.
Hello, Laurie Sheehan.
There we are.
Didn't expect your voice here.
Lots of fun people here.
I didn't expect your voice here. Hello.
Here I am. I'm like that bad penny.
We all turn up for Laurie. Let me see. I'm going to pin you because your hair is looking different.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Bring out the massive scissors, Laurie. Yeah.
I know.
and new glasses too. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah. We just had our MWA Saturday write-in. So I was up early and writing already, which is good. But
how many words have you written today?
How many words have I written? So I'm actually editing some of my writing. So I'm keeping count because I'm working toward a goal, but I've gone through almost 5,000 words already today. Some of them are new, some of them are not.
Yeah, well, Zoe and I will expect some really, really good questions from you for the editing part.
I'll see
No
what I can
pressure,
do.
no pressure.
No pressure.
No.
So just now that we've got more people here and we still have a few minutes before the official start, I want to let everybody know that we have already begun recording and pushed to Facebook Live. So as I mentioned earlier, if you're here with us and on camera, put on your best smiles. If you're wanted by any sort of law enforcement officer with 3 letters, you should probably just not be on the camera right now.
Yeah, Todd looks very shaky. I don't know.
Good mugshot though, good mugshot. I like the hat.
That's right.
It's 1 o'clock. If you want to wait for just a couple more minutes, if you'd like, up to you.
And maybe a minute, yeah, because we have a lot to talk about today.
Okay, well, we've got about, let me see, about 27 people are now here. Yay.
And we have 51 registered somewhere.
Let me tell you, I think I just downloaded the most recent report. And on that report, we have 93 people
Wow.
registered. So,
Go us. Good. I'm happy.
yeah. Yep.
I'm happy. It's sort of, in my estimation, it sounds a death knell for meetings in person at this point. I'm not, of course, you can't rule that out entirely.
Well, I don't know. I think it's going to depend on the kind of meeting too. Some things are going to lend themselves more to being together as a pack.
Right.
But I think things like this are great to be more inclusive. Todd, for instance, is in COVID exile in Idaho. He's in Iowa. So he left San Francisco and went home to help take care of his parents at the beginning of our latest fiasco. So if we weren't doing it online, Todd would not be able to join us. So I think those opportunities are wonderful to have our extended family be able to join from far away.
Right.
Also, we have Marjorie Tucker, who's on Facebook from Connecticut.
Hi, Marjorie. And Meredith Taylor, who's from the southern part of the world too. So
hey, Meredith.
These are my stalkers as well. So
I'm not going to say we like stalkers, but you know what I mean. We like stalkers.
I like them.
Oh. Yeah. Well, should we begin? We're at 102. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, why don't you go ahead? By the time you get through with the housekeeping and everything,
Right.
I'm sure we'll have more. So yeah, I would go ahead.
Okay, so I'm Claire Johnson, president of MWA NorCal. I want to thank you all for coming today. We have a wonderful, wonderful program. And I do want to note that this is being recorded and we are also live streaming to Facebook. So just be aware that you are sort of public. I would like you to please turn off your video and your audio when we begin the presentation so that we are only focusing on the speakers. That way it gives us, more of a focus. Drop your questions in the chat at the bottom of the section, bottom of your screen. And I'm going to be monitoring the chat questions and feeding them to the powers that be so that they're aware of things that maybe need to be addressed before the Q&A. So the way this is going to work today is that we're going to have Janet Dawson and Peggy Lucke talk about their publishing experience from 1 to 2:30. At 2:30, Laurie King and Zoe Quinton are going to take over and talking about editing your fiction once you've written that wonderful book. And then from 3:30 to 4, we're going to have questions. But as the questions filter in, I'm going to filter them to the speakers, and then they can decide if they want to answer them later or while they're speaking. Okay, so let me do the introductions. if everybody could, everybody muted, everybody. Yeah, okay, there we are. All right, so first I want to introduce Janet Dawson. Janet, where are you? I don't see Janet. Oh, there you are. Great. Okay, so Janet Dawson is the author of a long-running series featuring Oakland Private Eye Jerry Howard. Janet, I was looking at your Amazon page and oh my God, you're a writing machine. The first book in the series is the award-winning Kindred Crimes. It was nominated in the Best First category for 3 mystery awards, the Seamus, the McCavity, and the Anthony. A new Jerry Howard will be released in mid-March. Is this right?
Yes.
Titled The Things We Keep. You've also written the Jill McLeod series with her inquisitive Zephyrette, riding the rails on the California Zephyr in the early 1950s. The first in this series is Death Rides the Zephyr, and the most recent is Death Above the Line. Another series features Kay Dexter, a geriatric care manager who works with elderly clients and their families in a small mountain town in California. The first in this series is The Sacrificial Daughter. Other publications include What You Wish For, a novella, but not forgotten, and numerous short stories. Okay, Margaret Lucke, Peggy, flings words around in the San Francisco Bay Area as a writer, editor, and teacher of writing classes, and is also a writing coach. And her latest novel, House of Desire, is this correct, Peggy? House of Desire? A Tale of Love, Ghosts, and Murder in San Francisco. It's the second book in the Claire Scanlon Haunted House series following House of Whispers. Other works include 2 novels featuring artist Private Eye Jess Randolph, Snow Angel and a Relative Stranger, which was an Anthony Award nominee for Best First Mystery, and 2 how-to books on writing, Sham's Quick Guide to Writing Great Short Stories and Writing Mysteries. Margaret is also the editor of Fault Lines, an anthology of 19 stories by Northern California crime writers, published in 2019 by Sisters in Crime NorCal. Okay, Laurie R. King. You almost need no introduction here, Laurie. King earned a degree in comparative religion from the University of California, Santa Cruz, and a master's degree in theology from the Graduate Theological Union. A prolific writer, I can't stress that enough. She is perhaps best known as the creator of the Mary Russell series of historical mysteries featuring Sherlock Holmes as her mentor and later partner, and a series featuring Kate Martinelli, a lesbian police officer in San Francisco, California. She has received or been nominated for all the awards that the crime fiction community can bestow: the Edgar, Creasy, the McCavity, and the Lambda. She received an Edgar for the nonfiction book she co-edited with Lee Child, How to Write a Mystery, a handbook, published by Mystery Writers of America. It's an excellent book. Thank you very much. And recently, she received the highest award that MWA can bestow. She was named a Grand Master. Her latest book is Back to the Garden, and I suggest you buy it. It's a wonderful book. So Zoe, who's not here yet, is a literary strategist. She's something of a jack of all trades regarding the writing process. If you need a writing coach, she can help you get that story onto the page. Once that book is on the page, she can edit your manuscript with a commentary on plot, character development, style, and voice. Once your book is finished, hallelujah, she can provide detailed consultation regarding your publishing goals. I have used her services myself, and I can highly recommend her. She's wonderful. So we're going to start with Janet and Peggy. And so why? You both have been nominated for very, very prestigious awards. How do we get Peggy up there? Can we get Peggy side by side? No? No.
Hey, you might want to, this is Laurie coming in.
Hi, Laurie.
The disembodied voice. Claire, you might want to, in the top of your screen,
Says view.
View, where it says view, go to gallery view, and then
Okay.
you'll see everyone who has a live camera.
Right.
And for those out there, I just dropped something in the chat. Everyone else, if you are seeing that whack-a-mole pop up where you are only seeing the person who's actually talking in that moment, you're on speaker view. You might want to also go up to the top, select view, and then select gallery. That's going to show you everyone with an active camera, and it's going to feel more like you're watching a panel.
If I may offer a suggestion too, up in that
Of course.
same area, there's usually, on mine, there is a choice that says hide non-video participants. And that way you'll only see the people who have their cameras on.
Okay, there we go. Yeah.
Yep.
Terry,
Perfect.
Terry, thank you. Thank
Terry
you.
popped in.
Thank you, Peggy.
That's a
So-
great comment too, Margaret. We normally recommend that as well. So thank you so much for remembering to say that.
Right. Okay, so both of you have been nominated and won awards. So why be your own publisher? And this is different from self-publishing. This is actually being a publisher, correct? I have that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just start out with the big why. Why?
I'm gonna jump right in here. I had a very good jump off the diving board with my first book, Kindred Crimes. I won the St. Martin's Press Private Eye Writers of America contest for best first private eye novel. And then St. Martin's turned down my second. My agent at the time took it to another publisher, and I had a run of 9 books by the big New York publisher. And then they dropped me. A common complaint among writers. And then I had 9 more books with a wonderful small publisher, Perseverance Press. And they went out of business. Retirements, and the publishers just decided to close the business. So I am left with, I have all these stories to tell and no publisher. I'm not going to let somebody in New York or elsewhere tell me that I'm not a good writer. I'm just going to publish myself. And around the time I was thinking about this, a fellow writer and friend who is here today, DZ Church, known as Dawn Church, said, we should start our own publishing. So we did, and we are publishing our own books. I have published one book, The Sacrificial Daughter, and we called ourselves Bodhi Blue Books, naming the company after my cat and hers. And I've published one book with the Bodhi Blue Books imprint. That was 2 years ago, and I'm now about to publish a second book, the new Jerry Howard book, through that imprint. So that was my journey. It just seemed to me these days, with the state of the publishing industry and with the advent of ebooks, that I felt I could do it myself. So I'm going to hand off to Peggy. And if I lose you, it's because a cat walked on the keyboard.
My journey is very similar to Janet's. I had a first novel published by St. Martin's Press, who then in their wisdom turned down my second book, which got shopped around for a while. While I wrote a third book in that series, which also got shopped around for a while, and both came very, very close to finding new homes, but ultimately did not. My agent at the time then had ill health and left the business. I had a couple of nonfiction books. I've been published at this point by 4 traditional publishers, 4 different books. My nonfiction writing craft books were also done by traditional publishers. And one of those actually 20 years later is still in print and still doing well for me. But for the most part, I found traditional publishing to be a somewhat disappointing experience. There's just a little bit too much left at the hands of other people. I've always been somewhat entrepreneurial. I've been self-employed. My husband and I owned a printing business for many years, but it's been a long, long time since I've worked for other people. The printing business gave me some graphics background, And I thought, why not? So I started my publishing company, which is called Oak Ledge Press. It's named after the house where my grandparents lived when I grew up. I always thought it was wonderful that a house might have a name as well as just a street address. And my grandparents were both artists and they had their studios there. And I just thought this was the most magical place when I was a kid, because it was just a hotbed of creativity. And it seemed like a fitting thing to do. I actually practiced on other people's books. I've, in addition to these 2 books of mine that you see there that I've published, I've done 3 for other people, for friends. One for Chelsea Quinn Yarborough, a Western called The Law in Charity. A poetry book by Evie Grock called Half the Hurricanes. Wonderful poet. And a number of you may know Rita Lakin, who published the Getting Old Is mystery series and has been part of the Bay Area mystery community for a long time. Well, back in the 60s, she wrote a novel, a romantic comedy based on her own experiences as a young widow with 3 children getting back into the dating game, called Prince Charming Go Home. And so I published that for her. But I like the control. I like the extra creativity. I mean, writing is a wonderful way to be creative, but so is producing the books. There's a whole different level of creativity. I'm kind of visual, and publishing is a very visual game, cover design, interior design, and I just enjoy it very much.
I will say that in the process of getting this book ready for publication, I have now started formatting in my dreams. Not by choice, but there is a lot that we need to do, and I don't have Peggy's background with what she does, but I've learned by fits and starts and stumbling around, and I know that Laurie is going to get into some of this with talking about editing, but I have read this new book so many times that it's crazy, but I know that you need to read it over and over again and have other people's eyes on it, because I want it to be the best that I can produce. But I think it's been satisfying. I know that some of my experiences with big publishing, my second book, there was a 3.5-year gap between when Kindred Crimes came out and the publication of my second book, Till the Old Men Die. And that was a publishing, that was a choice that was made by the publishing company. The book was done, it was ready to go, but it was the publishing company adhering to their schedule. I did have a bookseller tell me that she felt that it was damaging to my career as a writer because everybody thought I had written one book and then went away. So that control of being able to say, all right, I'm going to publish the book when I want to, and also the cover control, being able to choose your own cover. I will say that the hardcovers, well, the covers of the Jerry Howard books were all over the map. The New York publishers could not seem to come up with a coherent look that said, hi, this is a series. So being able to make those choices for oneself is really important.
How do you, as your own publishers, how do you create that distance between your author self and your publisher self? How do you, because there is greater insight when you have someone else look at your material. We're kind of in our heads here, right? So how do you create that distance between the author and the publisher? I mean, beta readers, do you sit on it for 4 months? Peggy, you're in the position where you're going to, you're looking at someone else's work since you're publishing other people's material, where you can bring an objective viewpoint to their material. So how do you guys bring an objective viewpoint into your own material?
Well, I'll go. I'm not sure how objective the material, my viewpoint is, but it is different hats that you're wearing. And it does help to separate that out. I tend to have writing days and publishing days. The way my brain works, once I've got a project in front of me for the day, I have trouble shifting gears to a new project. So I hate days with long to-do lists, although I have plenty of them. So when I can, I like to concentrate one day on the writing, and when I'm doing publishing things, doing it that day. I think it helps a lot to have an entrepreneurial spirit, because you're basically in business for yourself. And this is true no matter how you're published. You want to manage your career, something I will confess I have not always done well. But you're also running a business. And one of the things that I learned in a small business seminar at one point was that there's 3 areas of that any business has to pay attention to. One is production, one is the marketing, and one is the sort of the finance and administration, the management of the business itself, all those details. So in this case, the production has a couple of phases. There's the product development phase, which is the writing of the book, and you're wearing that particular hat. And the editing of the book I would put in that too, because that's the process of finally having this product ready to go, the ready to work. Then there's the manufacturing part, which is the design and the formatting and the cover and all of that kind of thing, till you have something that's ready to put in the hands of the reader. So the writing is a piece of that, and a very, very obviously important piece, and in a lot of ways the fun piece much of the time. I've done a lot of developmental editing and line editing, and so I take a very critical eye to my own work. I do think taking some time off once you've finished that first draft, the throw the words on the page draft, taking some time before you read it and go back and edit it. I have writers groups and beta readers. Many people will hire an editor before they put their book out, so that there are those set of eyes. And even traditional publishers are often expecting that writers will do that now, so that by the time the book is submitted to an agent or a publisher, it really doesn't need any work, any editing, other than maybe clearing up a couple of typos. But it is kind of a challenge to wear all of those different hats and figure out what hat I'm wearing today.
Yeah. Janet, do you see yourself branching out like Peggy and moving on to a bigger stable of writers other than you and your co-partner in crime?
I don't know at this time. I think it's early days to make that kind of a decision. We have talked about it, but I also think that we haven't been doing this thing for a long time in terms of years, but So far, it's working out just publishing our own stuff. I would also second what Peggy says about wearing the different hats. I don't let my manuscript marinate for a specific amount of time. I might let it sit for a few days or for a week and then go back and do a reread. And it's usually pretty far along before I will let anybody else take a look at it. I go over and over and over and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And then when I'm feeling better about having somebody take a look at it, I will. Peggy, for example, read The Sacrificial Daughter when I was getting it ready to go. And I've had other authors read the new Jerry Howard book. So there's always the need for that other pair of eyes.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. So pros and cons.
Okay.
Pros and cons.
Well, I'll get that in a moment, but just to get back, one of the reasons that I chose to publish other authors was to add a little legitimacy to my publishing company. It wasn't just a vanity project, although, to some extent that's true. But I want to kind of also make a distinction between what is called self-publishing and what is called independent publishing, because a lot of people think of self-publishing, and there is a lot of this that goes on out there where people take their manuscript, slap a cover on it, put it up for sale, and it's not a good quality book, and it gives the rest of us a bad name. And there's a lot of small publishers like me and Janet who prefer independent publishing as a title because in theory it conveys a little bit more of a
gravitas
care for the quality of the book and trying to make the book really look indistinguishable from a traditionally published book.
Right.
I was at a friend's house yesterday who showed me a book she had received from a friend, and she says, I could tell just by looking at this that this was self-published. I didn't have to read a word. I didn't have to do anything. There are telltale signs, and you want to avoid those. And that's one of the cons, is that there is not nearly the stigma that there used to be about this, but there is still some, because there are still books being put out. It's so easy now, relatively speaking, that it's really easy to put out a bad product. It's harder to put out a good one. And that's one of the disadvantages. There's a lot of work involved. That would be a disadvantage for some people. There's a skill set and a learning curve that to put out that quality product, which could be a disadvantage too. It's going to cost you something, most likely, to hire an editor if you do that, or a proofreader, to hire a cover designer. Putting up the book is not usually terribly costly, but a lot of the production things can be. And we'll get to this later, I know, it can be difficult to get noticed and to have that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. I'm glad you made that distinction about independent publishing versus self-publishing, because anybody with an Amazon account can publish a book. And we're talking to Sheldon Siegel and Cindy Sample at an earlier event. And Sheldon threw out the figure that 20,000 books a day arrive on Amazon. Now that's that's combined. 20,000 means traditional publishers, but also self-publishers. So, I mean, that's a lot of books. And I mean, talking about the marketing, which we will put, stress later, but the issue of, I feel that in order to even hope for a dent in that barrage of books, whether traditionally published or independently self-published or independently published, whatever, it has to be the very best book, because if it isn't, there's just so much out there. there's so much out there that, you know, someone can read the first 10 pages. Usually you can tell in 10 pages if a book is decent. And so, you know, you don't have that luxury anymore because there are people just flooding Amazon with books. So the issue of how
I'd like to go back and address your question about the pros and cons. I think when my first book came out, which was back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, there was the prestige associated with and being published by a big New York publisher. But as we all know, you can get dropped by that big New York publisher in a heartbeat. Supposedly, the benefits of a traditional publisher, you get the editing job, you get the publicity. Now, I've had some good editors and I've had some bad editors. I know that Meredith, that you're on here, and Meredith was a really good editor, Meredith Phillips. And she edited one of my big New York publishing books. But you're at the mercy of their schedule, which I always found to be annoying. Hence my example about the 3.5-year gap between books.
yeah.
At least if I'm publishing my own stuff, I can decide when it comes out. I can have some control over my cover. And it used to be, well, you get lots of, marketing from the publishing. Well, my New York publisher never did much in the way of marketing. They operated on the let's throw the spaghetti on the wall. I did most of my marketing when I was published by a traditional publisher, and I do most of my marketing now. So, you know, there are pluses and minuses to anything. And we have the issue of agents. I don't have one anymore. I got dropped by my agent about the same time I got dropped by the New York publisher. And I'm more and more convinced that in this market, you don't need it.
I would like to add a couple of pros.
Sure.
While we're talking about pros and cons, because there are some. Besides the fact that you have the control. And for me, that's a big thing, because not having had the control did not serve me well in the traditional market. As far as the marketing goes, I had good relationships with all of the editors, and with one exception, when the book came out, it was sort of like being dropped down into a black hole as far as the publicity was concerned. But another advantage of it, though, and we kind of alluded to this earlier, is that you can go much more quickly from that manuscript that you're happy with and you think that, okay, this is, you know, perfect in every respect that I can make it, to that finished book. You know, you can do it in a month if you're willing to work hard at it, couple of months easily. Whereas it can be, particularly if you don't have an agent and have to look for the agent first, you know, it can be a couple of years before your book comes out.
Well, this brings up the issue of writing. I have another question I want to ask, but before this goes out of my brain, writing to trends. You know, I've heard all my writing life, don't write to trends. The trends that you're going to write to are going to be obsolete the minute you send it into a publisher. But if you are publishing your own material and, you know, you want to write a book on wizards, let's just use this as an example. You write a book on wizards, right? And so Harry Potter comes out, everybody loves wizards. Hundreds of people wrote books on wizards, but by the time a lot of those books came out, they had moved on to the next thing: werewolves, vampires. You know, there are definitely trends, and I would think with a independent publishing business, you could actually capitalize on trends because you have this production arm set up and you're not at the whim of a traditional publisher who is, maybe a year and a half out, at least 2 years out from publishing your book, which by the time it hits the market might feel stale. I mean, do you guys agree with that?
I don't think I've ever written to a trend.
No, probably not you.
I haven't either, but theoretically that would be true.
Well, but paranormal, you write into the paranormal, and that kind of goes up and down. I mean, it has a vogue, and then it doesn't, but then it has another, So I mean, you're not writing to trends because you're writing what you want to write, but there are definite trends in the market.
Well, there are definite trends in the market, and I just hope that I'd like to start one and let everybody imitate me and hold me up as the great exemplar of whatever it is. But yes, I think the fact that you can respond more quickly to the market, assuming you can write fast enough. I am not, unfortunately, a fast writer, as my list of books compared to Janet's or Laurie's or some of the others will tell you. But you do have that option if you're a quick writer. I did once attend a seminar on self-publishing by a very successful self-published author who said that the key really is, which I do not follow, obviously, but although I'd like to, is that writing a lot makes a difference. Books sell books. The more books that you have out there, the more the books will sell.
Right.
Another pro to doing it this way is assuming you can figure out how to get those books sold, you can earn more per book than you do with traditional publishing.
Mm.
You don't always get more money in your pocket because you may not sell that as many books, but theoretically that possibility exists once you master the marketing thing.
Well, Sheldon Siegel said in our previous presentation that he felt that you had to write, if you're doing the self-published, and I don't know if this model also figures into the independent publisher, which you guys are, but he feels that 3 books a year is a good formula for if you're putting your books up on Amazon without any sort of publishing arm as opposed to YouTube. I mean, you guys don't see yourself putting out 2 books a year, do you? Or 3 books a year?
I used to, as Peggy said, I don't think I'm a very fast writer. I mean, I used to write a book a year, but that was because I was being published by a traditional publishing company. I had signed the contract and I had to deliver a manuscript by such and such a date. So I really pushed myself. And now I don't have that deadline staring me in the face, and I can take the time I want. And as some of you know, I've had a very interesting couple of years with things going on in my life that just get in the way of writing. But at least if I'm publishing myself, I can take the time that I feel I need to produce the best book that I can write.
But don't you feel that, I mean, and maybe I'm too influenced by social media, but don't you feel that you don't want people to forget who you are, regardless of whether you have a traditional publisher, you are a publisher yourself, or you're throwing stuff up on Amazon. I mean, people do move on. And do either of you feel this, even though you have the choice of not rushing a book out, do you feel the pressure of, I call it feeding the beast, reminding people that you're still writing, so that they see a title, but they haven't seen a title from you in 4 years, and they're kind of wondering, well, what's going on here? Or the opposite. Oh, great, Janet's writing another book, writing another Jerry Howard. It's been a while since you've written Jerry Howard. So,
Right.
I
don't feel that need. I'm not getting any younger. I have books that I want to write, and if it takes me a while, it takes me a while. I'm in addition to getting this Jerry Howard book published, I'm working on a historical novel, and I can see that it's going to take me a while to write. So I'm at the point where I'm going to write the books I want to write because I have stories to tell and I want to get them.
What about you, Peggy? Do you feel
Well,
need to feed the beast?
yes and no. My brain would burst if I tried to write 3 books a year.
Same
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
And so I don't know that it's in the cards for me. But yes, you're right about needing to produce, needing to get things out there. It was Bella Andre who gave this presentation, who said this: books sell books, so that the more you have out there, the more you are going to be recognized, the more you're going to be noticed. If they notice this book, then they'll go back and look for your other books. But I think one of the very important steps, first steps ideally, but somewhere along the way, it does help to approach this as a business. And, we all have different goals for business, and I don't mean it has to be a money grubbing enterprise at all, but it does help to have a clear idea of what your goals are. Some people, it's to write this book and get it out into the world. And that's their goal, and it's a valid goal. Some people want to earn a lot of money at this. That's going to require a different approach.
Yeah, okay. And when you figure that one out, let me know.
Yes, well, exactly. I have not figured that one out, but I do know that that's some people's goal. So I think it's important to sit there and think about, what am I really trying to accomplish with this? What do I want to do with this publishing business? What's it going to take me? What are my resources that I have available to me? What are the things that I'm going to have to figure out? There's a few years ago at Left Coast Crime, there was a woman whose first name is Denise, and I'm blanking on the rest of her name, who gave an excellent presentation on a business plan for writers. And she has on her blog, this goes back a long ways.
Dietz? Was it Jenny Dietz?
No.
It wasn't Jenny Dietz. Okay.
No, it's something with an S in there. And when Laurie and Zoe are doing their thing, I will look it up and put the name in the chat.
Great, thank you.
People. But it was a 3-part blog. It's a very elaborate marketing plan. It's a little intimidating to me, but it does cover some of the issues that you want to think about. And, how many books do you want to put out a year? How are you going to distribute them? I mean, are you going to be Amazon exclusive? This is a question that people need to do.
Yes.
Or are you going to try to go wide, as the terminology is, which means put your book out with a number of different, for print books, it's Amazon and Ingram Spark.
Ingram Spark, yeah.
And there's a number of ebook publishers. Both of those do ebooks, as well as, there's Kobo, there's iBooks, there's, various others. There's Drafted Digital, which will put books out for you.
Yes, Drafted Digital.
It was Smashwords, but Smashwords and Drafted Digital recently merged. So how are you going to put these things out? There's a lot of questions to think about, and it's good to kind of think about them at the beginning. You can always change your mind and change your course.
Now, both of you put out, ebooks and hard paperbacks, right?
Trade
So
paper.
you do both, right? It's
Yes.
not just ebook exclusive.
Yes.
Okay. Laurie, did you want to say something?
Actually, I popped in sooner than I likely should have. I've been monitoring the questions. We have some good ones. Many of them can wait if they're pertinent. I sort of like to pitch them out while we're having the discussion of that topic. Meredith asked specifically to Janet, didn't you put various short stories on Amazon, which seems to be a good way to keep your name out there? And so if you'll talk about that a bit while we're talking about this. copy?
That's true. I have a number of short stories that were published in various anthologies, and also had a couple of short stories that were published in Ellery Queen. So I created those as ebooks and put them up both on Amazon and other platforms. And we'll get to the whole Amazon and other platforms issue later. I did have an idea for a novella some years ago, and I wrote that and put it up. So I have ideas for stories. I have stories that may not be novels. They may just be stories. And getting them up as ebooks is a good way to do that. And one other thing that I've done that has really helped me, I now have, when this book comes out, I will have 14 Jerry Howard novels. I have put the earlier books up on Amazon as what we call box sets.
Yeah.
So for such and such a price, you can get the first 9 Jerry Howard books, or you can get the last 4 Jerry Howard books. And I've also done that with the Jill MacLeod series. There are 4 books in that series. There is a Jill MacLeod box set featuring all 4 books. And my box sets seem to be my best sellers. So when you log on to Amazon, you see that I have 11 different books. 12 of those are short stories, and several of them are anthologies, in addition to the other books. Because, with this latest books, I have now written 24 books, which I think is a milestone. So
this
have the stuff.
right. So this brings up my next issue. I mean, the power of backlist. Both of you, Peggy, you have your nonfiction and your fiction books, Janet, your writing machine. And I know that some people are struggling to get their rights back, but I wonder if this is another a pro, but also a con, that if you don't have a tremendous amount of backlist, i.e. you don't have a cadre of readers who are loyal to you and want to follow you and will read the next Jerry Howard book because they've read the previous 13. So, I mean, I feel it's a good advantage that both of you have previously published, you have an audience. Excuse me. And you're also well known in the mystery community.
Well, I was very fortunate to get my rights back from the big New York publisher before ebooks were a thing. So I was glad that happened. And the first thing I did when I got those rights back was put up ebook versions of it. So yeah, it really is an advantage to have a backlist. It's also an advantage to have a presence in the mystery community. Heck, I joined MWA about the same time, which is over 40 years ago. So we've been around forever.
You're giving us away there, Janet.
I mean, yeah. I do, and that was also my next question about having a presence in the mystery community. Do you feel that joining local groups is relatively easy? There's not a whole lot of commitment other than maybe doing a Zoom session with me every now and then. But what about the cons, the conventions? And these are not, even though I know that the convention, people who put these conventions together do their best to keep the pricing low, but it costs money. And so I always find myself torn between the need to go to these cons and get my name out there, and then, can I afford it, sort of thing.
Well, as you know, Claire, I'm conventioned out. You and I have had that conversation. When I first got published, I went to all of them. I went to BoucherCon, I went to Left Coast Crime, and I I attended some of the smaller one-off or two-off conventions in between, went to everything, but that was, again, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth and it wasn't so expensive. And after the New York publisher dropped me, I didn't go because I didn't have it. And then I got to, well, okay, if it's nearby or if it's a place I want to see like Vancouver, or if it's Reno, just a short train ride up the road. But I just have to say, I think it's been valuable for me in the past. I think right now I am so conventioned out that unless it's up the road in Sacramento or down in Monterey, I may not be going. Peggy, what's your take on it?
Well, I've been to a number of conventions over the years. I've signed up for Left Coast Crime in Tucson. That's my home convention, if you will. That's the one that I go to most regularly. I've been not every year, but most years. I've been to BoucherCon several times, and there's some I'm sorry I've missed. I find that there's only so much time and money to go around.
Yeah.
And so I usually put it toward Left Coast if I'm having to make a choice for a year. There's some smaller ones that I'd like to go to. I hear good things about Killer Nashville, for instance. I've been to Malice Domestic a couple of times, but not recently, and enjoyed those very much. So I do think that they can be valuable. I think the mystery community as a whole can be valuable. Being part of this MWA chapter and our local Sisters in Crime chapter, I mean, there's benefits at the national level, and you need to be in the nationals in order to take advantage of the chapters. But, you know, you all are my people. I've been around a long time in both of these communities, as well as there's the Bay Area Romance Writers, which is also a wonderful community, which I joined because there was a romance element in my House of Whispers novel. And I figured, well, I should learn how to reach those readers. And while I don't consider myself a romance writer, I have learned a lot from and gained a lot from being part of that group. So I'm all for what I could learn, the friendships that I've formed, they've been invaluable to me. So any aspiring writer, I would encourage to get involved with their local writers community, whatever genre that exists in.
If only to understand what's happening in the publishing industry, you know, that's just the sort of the basic bottom line. Now, can you, Peggy, we talked about this online, but in email, about sort of the bullet point thing about, you know, how do you publish a book, and not on Amazon. I'm talking about, you know, actually publishing a book, getting ISBNs, doing covers. I mean, and Jen, if you have some pointers on this, be great for you to chime in.
Okay. We will assume that at this point you have the perfect book. The book is written. The book is wonderful. Not all of these steps are there. I think of it as sort of 8 categories of things to deal with. They aren't necessarily steps in that you do one first and then the next one, but they kind of happen simultaneously. And one, of course, is the writing and editing, the production of the manuscript. You want the good book. You take it through as many drafts as you need to. You get that other set of eyes on it. In many cases, that's going to mean using the services of a developmental editor, a line editor, a copy editor, and make sure that all of that kind of things, the proofreader, so that you've got this text that's all ready to go. Then you're going to have to sit there and create the front matter and the back matter that go onto that manuscript as well, which is not something that you do. That's something the publisher does, But that's things like, you know, your title page, your author's bio, your acknowledgements, your copyright page, all of that. And you assemble all of that into a master file. Meanwhile, you've been setting up your publishing entity. It's possible to publish with Amazon without having one, without buying ISBN numbers. They'll do it for you. Then they are your publisher of record. And my thought was having somebody else be the publisher of record was sort of like, you know, having a traditional publisher. They can always change their policies. They can always go out of business. They're not likely to reject your book, but there's seems like there would be downsides to it. So I wanted to be my own company, and I set up Oak Ledge Press. You register it with the county, the city, the whoever, you know, you get your doing business as licenses from the appropriate agencies. You figure out whether you want to set up a separate bank account for your company or just use your regular bank account for that. Then you go to Bowker. It's myidentifier.com is the website that you go to buy your ISBN numbers. You can buy them singly, but you're going to need one for the print and a different one for the ebook. So they will sell you 10 for almost the same price as 2. Then they go up in increments of price. I ended up buying 100 because I knew I was going to be publishing some other people as well. And the 100 was about the price of 20 if you bought 2 blocks of 10. So there's advantages to buying them and owning them yourself, I think. And then you kind of work out your timeline and how you're going to be about it. You'll want to set up accounts, your publishing accounts with Kindle Direct Publishing, which is Amazon's arm, and then decide again if you're going to do it exclusively through Amazon. And there are many people who do that and are very happy with that. There are some people who don't want to have their business exclusively with Amazon, and they will go with Ingram Spark. That is the publishing arm of the Ingram wholesaler distribution company. The advantage of going with Ingram Spark is that you can get books into bookstores. Bookstores who have an Ingram account can order your book. Chances are they will not if they don't have a good reason to, like somebody comes in and asks them to order it for them. But in theory, it's available to bookstores. I've heard stories of bookstores ordering a whole bunch of copies for like a signing, and you think, oh, good, the bookstore's handling all that. But then a lot of them go back and the author gets charged for them, and that's kind of a disadvantage. But go wide, go exclusively Amazon. Those are choices that you want to think about and make. Once you've got all that and you know what you want to do with the book, you want to set up your interior design. Interior design is an art. I remember once reading one book after another, and I was hating the second one, even though I'd really been looking forward to reading it and the content was good. I went back to look up something in the one I had read immediately previously and realized as I looked, oh, this page is so nice, that the struggle I was having with the second book had nothing to do with the content, but with the small type and the way the words were crammed together on the page and the tiny margins, and designing a book really so that it looks good makes such a difference. So both for the print and for the ebooks, they have different ones. There's software that can help you. There's a lot of book templates that are out there. I have used Vellum for ebooks, VELLUM. That's a Mac only program. There's another one I've been recently hearing good things about, which is called Atticus.
Atticus, yeah.
And I have not tried Atticus, but it works for both Macs and PCs and is probably worth looking into. Then you have to get your cover. And that's something a lot of people who do everything else themselves will hire out. There's a whole cottage industry of cover designers and interior designers and editors out there to help you. So you just have to find them. You don't necessarily have to do everything yourself. I have done a couple of covers myself. And it's kind of fun, but it's definitely a challenge.
There are cover companies that, and they're not actually bad. They're, you know, I mean, it's not even a cottage industry. I would say
No.
it's basically a
The
mansion.
big industry.
It's a huge, yeah.
I can add to what Peggy is saying because on the formatting the book, with the sacrificial daughter, I did the formatting in Microsoft Word, which was an adventure, but it worked. And I, for the second book, have used Atticus. It's a new program. There's a lot about it that I like. They have templates. There's a lot about it that I don't like. And after I publish this book, I'm going to write them a long letter telling them what I think needs to be improved. And I think that they will make changes along the way. I'd also like to point out that there is some software called BookBrush that I used to make covers and ads and various things. I just redid the header for my Facebook page in BookBrush, and it didn't take me very long. You know, there's a learning curve with any of this stuff.
I did the cover for the poetry book in BookBrush.
And as far as covers, I went with a cover designer for the cover to the sacrificial daughter, which was an interesting experience. I had all sorts of ideas and we kept trying things. And then the cover that I picked was something she just came up with on her own. Sue Trowbridge, who does my website, has done the covers for the new covers for the Jerry Howard books. Went with another cover designer for the new covers for the train books. So I'm stretching my wings as far as some of this stuff, learning how to do formatting with Atticus and learning how to do my own covers and my own ads.
So I think that there are some questions about, I think once you get the cover, then we're going to move into the topic of marketing, right? Okay. You have a book, you have a way to publish it. And, but I think there's some questions. Laurie Sheehan, do you want to jump on? You've got some questions from the audience.
I do have a few. Yeah, some of them you've already either answered or touched on, but I'm going to go ahead and put them out there so that the folks that are in our audience know that we're keeping track of their questions. Sharon had two that came in at different times. One of them you have handled at least most of the way. What kind of software do you use for manuscript preparation? So I don't know if there's something else that you want to pitch in for.
I use Scrivener. I used to write exclusively in Microsoft Word, and I like Scrivener a lot because it allows me to move chapters and scenes around, which is the way I write anyway, in Microsoft Word, or in any time in the course of writing a book. I'm always going, okay, well, I think this chapter needs to be over here, and I think this scene needs to be over there, and Scrivener allows me to move things around. The latest update of Scrivener also allows you to export an ebook or a formatted manuscript. I haven't tried that. I was eager to try Atticus, so I basically exported from Scrivener into a Word document and then threw it into Atticus.
And Peggy, do you have one that you
learning curve?
Well,
right.
As I said, I've used Vellum for a couple of ebooks. There's a version of Vellum that will also allow you to do print books. I've done most of my work actually in Microsoft Word. And what you upload is PDFs for the print books at any rate. You ultimately have, and you can do that for the ebook version for Amazon as well. For other formats, you'll want an EPUB file, which Scrivener will create, and Vellum will create. So I've done all of that. You know, with Microsoft Word, it helps to be familiar with the styles features on Microsoft Word. But it is always made, when I do it that way, with using the styles and take some care, it's always given me a PDF that Amazon has accepted right off the bat. Ingram keeps telling me there's something wrong with the file, but they won't tell me what, and the book looks fine. So, you know, they're more persnickety about these things, but I never quite figured out why. So you can do it in all of those. Somebody, Sharon mentioned the Adobe Creative Suite. InDesign is the, at least I know it was, I assume it still is the design software of choice for professional graphic designers. I'm not at that level. I have a sister who's a professional graphic designer, and she uses that. She's done a couple of covers for me and used that for that. I don't know that for most people who are publishing in the way that Janet and I are, that InDesign is necessary. There are certainly ways you can do it without that.
Yeah, so I think the short answer to that question then is there's no one way to format to move into a platform that's going to publish your works. It's going to depend on what that platform is. I think, so the preparing of the work that Shan's talking about actually does tie in with what Janet said. She talked about what she writes in Scrivener and how that then becomes the program that prepares her work for the next step where it goes into that platform for publication. So Sharon also had a question, and this is a good section, I think, for this one. She asked, how do these projects actually become books? She mentioned local printer or individual bids for individual projects. So talk a bit about the tangible bit of that thing that we can hold in our hand. And then Chuck asked about distribution. How do you handle distribution? I think Peggy mentioned getting a book in a bookstore, but he asks, you know, do you get your books in bookstores or do you fill those orders yourself? So I'll let you guys handle those two for a minute.
Okay, well, as far as the physical books, print on demand is a wonderful technology. I am kind of surprised that traditional publishing doesn't use it more. You upload it to Amazon and you can order the physical books straight from them. They publish the book when it's ordered. They do the printing. They've got printing companies around, 2 or 3 around the country that will fulfill the order. So you don't need to necessarily end up with a whole garage full of boxes of books that you don't know how to sell.
Yeah, I have that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have some too, but for different reasons, from a different source.
Yeah.
That's a great advantage of these. So you don't need to worry about finding a printer. You don't need to find a, you know, the storage space. So, you know, that part gets handled, and I'm forgetting what the other part of the question was.
Bookstores.
Oh, bookstores. Well, again, readers can go directly and order them online. You can, if you go through Ingram Spark for your print books, you can, in theory, get them in bookstores. Getting the bookstores to want to carry them is a different issue entirely. But, you know, your sister-in-law could walk into the bookstore in her local hometown and say, I want to order a copy of Margaret Lucke's wonderful new book, you know, House of Desire. Can you get that for me? And the bookstore could, assuming it has an Ingram account. Not all bookstores do. So getting them into bookstores is a somewhat dicey proposition. But an awful lot of book sales are being done online these days.
What about if you do print on demand, say, and you have an event at a library? I mean, that would be a way to get readers, right? If you have, say you have 15 copies of your book, MWA has an event where we've got, a reading, and I mean that, that's not a huge financial investment, but it's also a way to get a book and also get to the library to know you, right?
It's called Bring Your Own Book.
Right.
Yes, the same way, and the same with conventions.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be the thing. Would do that at conventions, bring my books, like last year in Albuquerque, and consign books to one of the booksellers there. I'm doing an event at the Alameda Library later this spring with a couple of other authors, and I will bring my books.
Both Amazon and Ingram will let you order authors' copies.
Yeah.
You can get them, at least from Amazon, you can get them at cost. So it's not terribly expensive. And most of the time, if you're doing an event in the bookstore, they will let you have the books there on consignment. They'll take a cut for selling them for you. You get a cut because it's your book.
Yeah.
The book dealers at the conventions will generally do the same.
Right.
You just have to be aware of it enough ahead of time to order the author's copies, 3 weeks in advance, because while you can get full price copies, if you have Amazon Prime, you can get it in 2 days, but it takes a long time if you're ordering it through your author account.
So what have you found to be the most effective way to market your books? As publishers, I mean, as authors, we all kind of do this, but is this when you put on your publisher hat, or are you wearing two hats? I mean, what do you personally feel is the most valuable in terms of marketing your product? Because that's actually what you have, right? Your product. Right?
Since I'm publishing my own book, I'm doing the same thing I've been doing for 30 years, is getting myself and my name out there. I'm doing a guest blog on somebody's blog later this year. I'm doing the Facebook thing, God help me. Although I refuse to participate in any of the other platforms. Just getting my name out there. And I've long ago given up hope of ever being a bestseller. So I do what I can and not worry about it.
What about you, Peggy?
Well, it's a challenge. I was hoping Janet would have all the answers. And it's a challenge whether you're traditionally published or independently
Yes,
published.
it is a
Send
challenge.
me
Because
money and I will give you all the.
It used to be that I have a friend who's been writing for many, many years, and 50 years ago, her book contracts with traditional publishers would basically forbid her from doing any marketing on her own.
Oh my God.
I've heard of that.
Nowadays,
That's a
they
lie. That
assume
has
you
to be
will
a
do
lie.
all of the marketing on your own.
Yeah.
So there's a variety of tools.
Because they don't.
You obviously need to have your website out there so people can find you that way if they want. I do a newsletter. I hope to keep it fun and informative and entertaining, and I welcome anybody here to sign up for it. Just go to margaretlucke.com and it'll be right there on the home page, the sign up.
Do you have a separate Facebook and apparatus for your publishing company?
I have a Facebook author page, which is available to everybody, and a Janet Dawson Facebook page, which is just limited to.
But you don't have
Yeah.
a Bodie Blue page. You're not.
Not at this time, no.
I don't have one either, although that may be something that I will do in the near future. I know somebody who does online publicity. He's a consultant, a publicity consultant who does online publicity. And when House of Desire came out, he was helpful to me in setting up some blog dates. You know, the blog tour is another tour tool that people use. I teach in quite a few classes and you know, do speaking engagements when I can. I love talking about writing, you may have noticed. So I try to do that as well. Recently I joined the Grand Canyon Writers chapter of Sisters in Crime, which has kind of a subgroup that just talks about marketing. And I found that picking the brains of those people has been useful. The big thing right now, as far as I can discern in marketing your books, is ads, Amazon ads and or Facebook ads.
Yeah.
That's kind of the buzzword of the moment.
And I would like to add that I too have a newsletter. It's a joint newsletter with Easy Church, the Bodhi Blue Books newsletter. And I was doing the newsletter myself monthly, and I thought, gee, it would really help if we had another person to provide content for this newsletter. And I think that has worked out well. One thing that we have been doing quarterly is writing really short stories, 700-word short stories, and to a theme. Like one quarter it was fire, and another quarter it was, since it was October, it was going to be ghosts. And I have to say, I've noticed that our open rate on our newsletter is higher on the months when we have the short stories. So it's fun to try and figure out, to play with the newsletter.
Have you guys been able, Ellen Kirschman asks, have you guys been able to get reviews of your books?
Oh, that's a big question. Something that I brought up in an email to Peggy and to Claire is, if you are independently or self-published, it's very difficult to get reviews. A lot of publications will not review self-published books. I suppose they're inundated with books, period. So I will ask people, you know, I go to various websites. The online magazine Kings for Life is a good resource for getting reviews. It's also a good resource for ads. I'm planning on doing an ad with them. And one issue that has come up of late is paying for reviews. There's a stigma about that. I do know that Kirkus Reviews and PW, you can pay a fee and get a review. I'm of two minds about that. A fellow writer has pointed out that if big publishers are buying ads in PW, are they not paying for reviews that way? It's an interesting thought, and I'd be interested to hear what Peggy has to say.
I have not paid for reviews. I know that that's a thing, and certainly Kirkus and PW are both, you know, they're out there. They're widely read,
Right?
So I'm not sure whether a PW review, how much that helps if it goes mostly to bookstores, and if the bookstores are not going to be ordering, you know, independently published books, then, you know, does it do you that much good? But it does have, I think it's a monthly section called Book Life devoted to independent publishing.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Such
And
reviews
I will
as
say I've
I've
had
got,
some really bad PW reviews when I was.
yes, paying for a review does not guarantee you a good review.
No.
And so there's that as well. I got some reviews on online sources with the help of my publicity consultant friend. So, you know, but it is a challenge. The marketing thing is a challenge, and is a
It really
good,
is.
it's a good topic for a future program devoted just to that, and it would be a benefit to everybody, I think.
Do you guys use Amazon ads?
I have in the past, not lately. I think I tried a Facebook ad once in the past and was underwhelmed. I had better luck with the Amazon ad. I've had some BookBub ads.
And the return on any of those endeavors?
Pardon?
The return on any of it, like in BookBub, did you get a
The
bounce from it?
return on BookBub was, the first time was phenomenal, less so subsequent times.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of places out there where you can place ads. I'm gearing up, I think, to try some more Amazon ads. That doing the ads is something I haven't been paying attention to lately, and probably should.
Now, I'm just gonna make a wild stab at this, but I'm going to assume that neither of you are on TikTok. Is that a valid assumption?
That's a valid assumption in my case, although it is something I've been thinking about. I have a young relative who's 13 now, who set me up with a TikTok account and said, you need to do this. So I think there's one post out there that she basically did for me that I'm not going to send anybody to look for. But, you know, but she assumed it would be the first of many. But I know that there are people who are using it. There's a kind of a subset to Book Talk.
It's Book Talk,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's called Book
Yeah.
Talk. And I've seen some stuff, I've seen some programs about how to do it. And it might be something that I'll explore in the coming years. Marketing in general is something that I want to explore over the coming year, including ads.
I would also add that if you're an author and you have not claimed your BookBub author profile, because what I do on BookBub is if I read a book that I really, really like, as I did earlier this week, I go on BookBub and post a review of it. And I find that I gain followers on BookBub that way. And people review my books. You know,
Yeah.
they like the review that I posted, so they'll go try one of my books, and then they'll post a review of it. And I've gotten some very nice reader reviews from BookBub. I guess it's the same thing with Goodreads. I've never paid that much attention to Goodreads.
Well, Todd brings up, he says that in the chat that Facebook ads do not work as well as they did a couple of years ago. That's his 2 cents. And I've heard that from other authors. And Cheryl Potts says, well, what about reviews on Goodreads?
And some nice ones. I just don't look at Goodreads that often.
Are you connected with Goodreads at all, Peggy?
I am, and I don't go on it that terribly often. For a while, Goodreads was getting kind of a bad reputation because there were a lot of trolls on there and a lot of people who were there just to trash books.
It got very, very ugly, very ugly.
I understand the climate there is a little better now than it used to be. But addressing Todd's comment that Facebook ads do not work as well as they did a couple of years ago, I've heard that, and I also, nothing works as well as it did a couple of years ago. And one of the challenges about independently publishing and getting your books out there in the world at all is that the publishing world is, in all of its manifestations, is a constantly moving target.
Yes.
It's changing very, very rapidly. When the Big Five went to court recently for that, the Big Five traditional truck publishers went to court recently with the Department of Justice lawsuit that was trying to prevent Penguin Random House from absorbing
Simon and Schuster.
Simon and Schuster. that got blocked. So it's still the big five, not the big four. But there was a headline I read about that case, which summed it up beautifully, which I thought was, and the headline read, publishers have just spent 3 weeks in court explaining that they have no idea, absolutely no idea what they're doing.
That was clear to a lot of us a long time ago.
And so that's the thing, is to pay attention. It's one of the reasons why having a writer's community is good, is you can tap in on other people's recent experience. It pays attention to, what's out there in the world. You mentioned at one point when we were talking about this program, books that might be helpful. And the problem with books is they go out of date so quickly.
I know.
And so there's some websites that I think are pretty good about it. I just recently downloaded Joanna Penn's book, Successful Self-Publishing, which is available for free. The ebook or a PDF you can get for free through her website, which is thecreativepenn, PENN.com. And it's looking pretty good, and it was updated about a year and a half ago, and seems to have a good summary of the basics. But there's a lot of information out there. If you Google how to self-publish a book, you will find millions of results, some of which are good and some of which less so. And you sign up for any of these things and suddenly you're on the mailing list for 3 emails a day from
Forever.
source.
Right.
I would add that as a writer, I have a limited amount of time. I want to sit at my desk and write books. I don't want to spend my time bouncing from Goodreads to Facebook to TikTok or whatever.
Yeah.
I have to ration my time and spend it on writing and not spend an inordinate amount of time on marketing, and just hope that I can produce a good book that we're going to want to read.
Emily Nichols, before we close up here, so that Laurie and Zoe can, now that we've have a book, we can, what do you do when you have a book before you move on to getting a cover and an ISBN? So Emily Nichols says, marketing is like building a spider web. My husband and I have found very consistently that with our small business, oops, what happened? Oh no, with our small business, we have much more success when we leave tethers connected to our different social media presences and be as personable as possible, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs that lead people with your target demographic from one media presence to another. They use Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, and Facebook ads. Facebook ads depend on people's I keep losing this, sorry, people's ability to stop scrolling and don't do nearly as well as inviting them to see you and your process while you create something you love. Creativity is your best marketing tool. People want to feel inspired and feel connection with the other creators. And I think that does speak to community. Yes. All of us are, we're part of the MWA community. And, what I have, and maybe, let's sort of just wrap this up, but it seems to me that as publishing continues in its path of not knowing what they're doing, that we actually effectively are becoming our own publishers, whether we are becoming our own publishers.
Whether you like it or not.
Whether you like it or not, you need to, with the exception of maybe doing a book cover, which the publisher does, but you have to do, you have to basically do your own editing. They want pretty much a camera ready copy before it gets there. And once it gets there, so they have input on the book cover, but you have no control over when it's published, and you have to do your own marketing. So it seems to me that if people have the financial wherewithal, certainly looking into becoming an independent publisher is, in some ways, is a no-brainer. if you find that you're not getting traction in the market. I mean, that's what it seems to me. I mean, you guys are at an advantage that you both have backstory that you can market, you can leverage. And it would be very hard, I think, for someone who doesn't have that backstory to do what you two have done. But it's not impossible. It just would take a lot of marketing and a lot of effort.
Reading Emily's comment, which is excellent, and thank you, Emily, for that. This popped into my mind, which is that there's sort of 3 C's. There's the community, which helps you learn, helps you figure out what you're doing, and the community can be online, the community can be in meetings like this, the connections you make with other writers and with readers. There's communication, which is getting the word out. How you do that through your website, through your newsletter, through your social media posts, through ads, through whatever it is. And the third one would be consistency.
Yes, I agree.
Because it's something that you have to do on a regular basis. You can't do any of this once. Books sell books, and so does keeping your name in front of the readers, in front of your audience.
Yeah, that's great. That encapsulates everything we've been talking about for an hour and a half. I really want to thank both of you for your words of wisdom and all your effort. It was a great presentation. It actually makes me want to start a publishing company. You have many years to bring to this, not too many, but you have some years to bring to this process. And I know that the participants appreciate your words of wisdom. Thanks. And I'm looking forward to, when are you going to write another book, Peggy? I didn't see anything coming up on your, you are not writing another book. Janet's got a book coming out in March, but you don't.
Well, I'm in the middle of writing now. I have to say COVID slowed me down a little bit. I did not have COVID, but we had, life was weird for a while. But I'm in the midst of writing the third haunted house mystery book, which is my working title is House of Pancakes, but it will probably end up being House of Shadows when it gets published. I also have, and one of the thing about doing it yourself is that the publisher isn't forcing you into certain directions. I have a science fiction novella in the works, kind of a comedy thing, I hope, or something light anyway. And I've been teaching for a long time. I'm in the process of packaging some of my insights on writing craft into a series of writing craft books.
Great. Well,
and I just put, and I see Janet did too, we both just dropped our website addresses into the chat. If anybody wants to visit us there or sign up for our newsletters, please do.
Great. Well, thank you.
And thank you for having us. Thank you for this opportunity.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Laurie and Zoe, you guys want to come on? There's Laurie and Zoe. Thank you.
Sorry about my sunshine.
Oh, well, I have this weird light thing that goes on and off. It's like I'm being grilled by the police.
Yeah. There you go.
So I'm just going to let you and Zoe just take it away. I don't even need to be here because you know what you're doing.
Why?
Yeah, you know what you're doing. So much more so than I do. But yeah. And I don't know, is Zoe on? I know Zoe signed on somewhere.
Yeah, I think she's here. There she is.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to say goodbye and probably come in at the end for questions. But you two, can you ask to unmute? You there?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Is that good?
Yeah.
Yeah, you had to allow my video. So I was like blind and mute, just sitting here like.
Sorry.
Where am I? No, it's okay. Here I am.
Okay, so I'm going to bow out and let you two take it away.
Thanks, Claire.
Okay. All right. So
Well,
I'll be back at 3:30 for questions.
I should pick up on what was being said towards the end there is the idea of MWA and community. One of the things that that we always like to sort of mildly suggest on this, that if you are watching something like this that is produced by MWA or specifically MWA NorCal, and you have found it useful, you might think about joining us. You don't have to be a published writer. You don't even have to be a writer if you don't want. You can just hang out with the big kids. We have I think there's a couple different budget ones for young people and for old folks.
Yeah, students
So,
and seasoned people,
Yeah.
people.
So for if you're over something or under something, you can get half price. You don't have to be traditionally published. You can be self-published. You can be, I think, Zoe, are you actually an active status member now? Did you qualify for your short story?
No, I haven't made enough money off of publishing my writing yet. I know I'm like $150 short or something.
So buy another copy of that book.
No, I need to sell another story is what I need to do.
Okay.
I know.
So anyway, my name is Laurie King. I will start out this little routine here, and then the other young lady who is much more able and much more fluid when it comes to these things than I will take over. This happens to be someone that I lived in the same house with for a number of years. So Zoe and I work together in a lot of ways. I was first published going on 30 years ago, and I started out in traditional publishing and am still there. Fortunately, I don't know how I would have done it if I'd had to do everything myself. So those of you who are looking at self-pub, I stand back in awe. I have published my own stuff. I found it a lot of work, also rewarding, but I am still with the traditional publishers so far. So we are talking now about editing. I'm going to talk a little bit about self-editing because that's what I do. In traditional publishing, you have an editor who buys your book from the publishing house. They then take care of the editing and the copy editing, either in-house or they farm it out. And Zoe is then going to come in and talk about her side of things, which is as an editor. So both of us, I believe, would agree that, I hate to put words in your mouth, my dear, but I think that you would agree that in whether you are planning on self-pub or whether you are going the traditional route, you want your book to be as polished, as perfect, as thoroughly edited as you possibly can get it before you let it out of the house. So how do you do that? I mean, it's not easy to edit your own material. I've been doing it for 30 odd years now, and I still find it difficult to edit my own stuff, but I've done a lot of it. And I think that to my mind, it sort of starts with what does your manuscript look like when you're finished with your first draft? Now, I am a what we politely call an organic writer.
Is that the polite term these days?
Yeah, that's my term for it.
I like that.
Some people call it a pantser, as in seat of the pants. Some people call it completely disorganized. I prefer the word organic. And I am the kind of writer who doesn't always know what they're writing when they start out. I have vague ideas. I sometimes have an ending in mind. I have characters, settings, theme, all that kind of thing kicking around my brain. But I depend on my first draft to tell me what the book wants to look like. Now, a lot of people are organized writers. They are people who write an outline. And whether this is an actual, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3 stepped outline, whether this is a series of Post-its on a whiteboard, whether this is an ongoing timeline of your book, any of those forms work fine. 3x5 cards, whatever combination of words and visualization your brain needs to set it out. If you have organized your book beforehand and you've written it according to that, theoretically, your rewrite should be simple. Theoretically. The first step in either case, whether you are an outliner or an organic writer, would be to look at the overall picture so that you have this first draft, whether it's 200 pages or 700. You need to look at it as the entire picture, the big picture of the thing. Does it do what you want the book to do? Now, normally when you start a book, you have a vague idea of where you're going with the book. If it's a thriller, that's what you're writing towards. If it's a humorous cozy, that's what you're writing towards. If it's a combination of crime and sci-fi, that's what you're looking at for the big picture. So how does your first draft reflect that? Is it consistent all the way through? Are you saying what you meant to say in the book? Now, I'm not asking whether you think the book is perfect, because
It's not.
If you have a first draft and you think it's perfect, either you're a Pulitzer Prize winner or you're just wrong. Because the first draft, purpose of a first draft is to give you something to rewrite. So you have a first draft, you look at it and you have various points that you need to check along the line. So what are those points? And I would, as I started out the thing in the beginning of raising this book, this is a book that I co-edited with Lee Child. The material in it is from 70 different authors, all of whom were chosen by their expertise in the area that they were asked to write on, or who won a contest on their tips. And I highly recommend it. I don't receive any more royalties out of it. MWA does. But it's a really good book to give you a cross-section of what to do as you're writing a mystery. And that includes everything from cozy to thriller. So I wrote the chapter on the rewrite in there. And so what I'm going to do is to kind of go through the points on that are from that chapter. I should also mention that there are a lot of videos on similar topics, including one that I gave on the rewrite a couple of months ago on the MWA NorCal Facebook page. We have a whole collection of videos, an excellent Saturday Live, as she calls it, that Glenda Carroll does with us on various topics that have to do with the craft of crime. Usually they're fairly short, from 40 minutes to an hour, focusing in on one particular aspect of writing crime. So take a look at those. And again, if you have found them useful, do think about joining MWA. So you start out with the big picture. What are you saying in the book? Is it going where you want it to go? That one of those questions that is immediately raised is, what is the genre here? What are the rules and regulations that you're kind of aiming towards? And although we have this wide genre of mystery or crime or whatever you want to call it, but we call it mystery just for lack of a better name. And you have it, and each of the subgenres seems to have a kind of set of rules. Now there's reasons for this, and some of them are easily broken. Some of them are kind of silly. Some of them go towards defining what you need to do with the book. You need to be aware of the usual conventions for that particular subgenre of, why do you write a certain way if you're doing a cozy as opposed to a thriller? Cozies generally have gentler crime, little sex, little violence. They tend to have fewer, it's sort of less rough language. Whereas the thriller is all about short chapters, fast action, heart-pounding things all the way. And there are ways to build that in your writing that emphasizes that particular subgenre. So that's your first job, is where is this book that I've written? What is it, and how do I make it more so? One of the questions that pops up immediately in looking at how a mystery works and how well a mystery works is the plot. If you're writing mainstream fiction, if you're writing most kinds of sci-fi, the plot can wander, it can go anywhere. But with a mystery, you have to have a plot that works and that moves and that has a beginning and a middle and an end. Again, it sort of differs depending on what your subgenre is, but you need to look at the plot. Does the machinery work? And I would suggest that if you are an outlining writer, take a look at your outline and see how well you supported it in your writing. Did you leave anything out? Did you overemphasize any areas? Are all of the steps clear? If you're not an outliner, this is the time to make one. This is the time when you should go through your manuscript and take note of what happens to whom, where. And as you go through, you can either lay it out as an outline or a timeline or 3x5 cards or whatever, but something that if there's a part missing, it will jump out at you. And I think that Zoe will talk a little bit more about this and how you can look for things like that. Pacing is really important in a crime. You have to have things happen in a logical progression. You have to know when to ramp up the tension and when to let it pace down a little bit and let your characters take a deep breath. You don't want the pacing to be at the same rate the whole way, to build and build and build and build and build. It's just exhausting and hard to keep track of what's more important. That too is something you should keep an eye on as you're doing your rewrite. The characters, do they all make sense? Is their character development logical? Do you like the ones you should like? Do you loathe the ones who are loathsome? But do you also find likability in the villains and things that are not so comfortable in the good guys? Are your characters complicated enough to be interesting? Are they perpetually challenged as they go along? Because it's a challenge that makes for an interesting character. The language used, does the language support the kind of book it is? Does each character have their own kind of way of speaking? Is your language the sort of thing that is easily accessible by your reader? Is it something they're going to have to stumble across? And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's simple. It just has to be clear, which is a very different thing. If you have research in there, this is something that trips anyone up who is doing complicated research. Did you get it right? Your historical research, Do you have the right period, the right clothing, the right technology? If you're writing spy books, are they behaving like spies are able to behave? I think Zoe is going to talk a little bit about beta readers. And one of the things that you should ask for is, do my people get it right? Have I missed anything and overlooked something? I was writing a passage not very long ago set in 1830, and I casually had somebody light a candle with a match. But of course, there weren't matches. And I thought afterwards, no, that's outside the period. So I had to do something else. It's that kind of unconscious, oh yeah, they light it with a match, that gets you into trouble and gets you those letters from people saying, in 1830, they would not have had Vestas. So have your beta readers keep an eye for facts. The background of the characters. Background is a tricky thing, because I tend to think you don't want to have to stumble across it all the time. You certainly don't want to have an info dump of some character's entire backstory. But whatever backstory you give them needs to be consistent, whether you put it in just one place or whether you sprinkle it throughout. It needs to be consistent to who they are and to feed into the character as they are now. If I find something out in backstory, I don't really care unless it enlightens me about who the person is now. Dialogue is something that you need to keep an eye on and use as you're doing a rewrite. Does everyone have their own distinctive way of speaking? Does it sound like speaking, or does it sound too formal? There's this weird balance when it comes to dialogue, because on the page, if you actually wrote how someone speaks with all the ers and ums and half sentences and words that go in the wrong direction, it becomes impossible to read. But if you write it as if it were simply narrative, it goes cold. So you want these touches of personality in your dialogue of that individual, but also reflecting that they're speaking, that they're sometimes changing their minds mid-sentence, that they're drifting off a little bit, not too much. Individual characters have different styles of speaking, and that should be reflected in each one. And the overall sound of the book, by which I mean, when someone finishes this book, when you finish this book as a reader, what taste is left in your mouth? What is the sort of overall sensation of sound from the book? And is that what you're aiming for? Going back to the beginning, is that what you were aiming for? And how can you make that sort of orchestra of sound that is 300 pages of prose? How can you make it a little bit more so? So all of these things are what you need to take into account as you're doing your rewrite. And those are things that everyone should do for their own books before you give it either to your in-house editor or to somebody like Zoe Quinton. So, Ms. Quinton,
that's me.
I have a manuscript. Let us say this manuscript is a cozy mystery that is 812 pages long. And I just finished it last week and I'm thrilled about it. What are you going to do?
Good job. Charge you a lot of money because that's really long. So I would probably tell you, bless your heart, that's at least 3 books in the cozy genre. So this is one of the main things about knowing your genre. It's not just to get the plot points right or to get all the tropes. There's not just a checklist that you have to do for it. there are certain things, depending on your publishing goals, there are certain things that you need to get right in order to get someone to get in the door. And that's definitely the case for showing it to agents or publishers, but I think it's also the case, sometimes even more so, for people who read self-published books, because they know those points that you need to hit. So if you're coming to an audience of people who love cozies and read 3, I don't even know what a good pace is because I read so differently, but 3 a week, let's say, and you give them an 812 page book and your name is not Diana Gabaldon, then which I still don't know how she managed to accomplish that, but we'll leave that aside. Assuming you're just a normal average person, that's going to be a trilogy right there. So I would tell you, either save yourself some of my time and your money by taking that 812 pages and either cutting it way down, editing the crap out of it and making it into 250, or make it into a trilogy that you can then market that way. And sometimes, for people that read self-published books, really adore that stuff. They love finding one book and then there's a ton that come after it. So to have that backup material is probably a good idea. So that's the first thing I'd tell you. And then I'd send you a way to go do that on your own, or either that, or you could hire me to work with you to cut it into 2 or 3 books. And I've done that before with historical fiction, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You do have to give it each book a beginning, middle, and end. So that's what I would do with your 812 page cozy.
So why don't you start a little by saying what it is that you do and what people, how people would find you. Who are you?
Who am I? Well, I have a sign on my desk that says I'm kind of a big deal. So just keep that in mind, because my mom gave it to me, so it must be true. It's a good reminder for me. So I'm what's called an independent editor. I'm not associated with any house. And I kind of hung out my own shingle, I guess it was about 6 years ago. Obviously, I grew up in the publishing industry. My first Edgar's Awards was when I was 13 years old. So that's just been part of my life for forever. And I realized after working with Laurie for almost 15 years, I realized that I knew about as much as the publishing industry as she did. So I might as well use this to help other authors. And I've always been an avid reader, and turned out that was basically my only skill. So I thought at the time, how hard could it be? So 6 years later, I have a thriving business, and clients find me either through events like this. Networking is wonderful for people to find me, or conferences. I meet a lot of people that way. I get a lot of clients that way. So for this genre in particular, it would be VoucherCon. Left Coast Crime is coming up in a very short period of time, and I will be there. But also through referrals. I get a lot of business from Jane Friedman, who I don't think was mentioned. She may have been mentioned before I jumped on the beginning part, but I think in terms of resources for especially self-published authors, you can't get better than her. And I'm very proud to be on her referral list of resources that she sends out to people that she helps. So or they just come across my website. I've gotten a lot of people that just Google developmental editor, independent editor, and they find me that way. So once I've established that it's someone I want to work with, unfortunately, I don't have enough time to take on everyone that comes across my desk, but either I'll refer someone out to someone I think is more fitting, or I'll take them on and put them on a wait list. And then you would send me your manuscript, and I kind of like to do a first read through I usually do it on my Kindle app on my iPad, because I prefer to read it as a reader the first time. So I also do line editing rarely, but I find that if I have a line editing hat on, then I go in and I change the sentences and words, and then I don't see the story. So I need to make myself back up and take a higher level look for what everything Laurie was just talking about. So I will talk about plot, I will talk about characterization, I will generally in those things call out inconsistencies. So why is this person talking in one way here and doing this here, and then all of a sudden acts and talks in a very different way in chapter 42. So I take a very high level look, and it's not, you know, your verb didn't agree with your subject or any of that stuff at that point. It's just story. It's, does your story work? It's, what are your story goals and how can I help you accomplish those? So I try to take a very holistic view of the manuscript depending on, and I will either email or talk with you about what your goals are. So if you're looking for an agent, that's one thing. If you're looking to self-publish, that's kind of a different thing. In fact, sometimes I get relieved when people say they want to self-publish, because there's a whole bunch of restrictions on a kind of story you can tell that go away. I had one client that wrote a really fantastical modern day retelling of, I think it was Hercules 12 Labors. And when I first read this, I was like, this isn't going to go anywhere. It's too different for agents. There's no market for this. And he came back to me and said, oh no, don't worry about it. I want to self-publish. And I wanted to say hallelujah, because I think especially if you're a good marketer, you can find the right audience for just about any kind of book. You do have to be, as our ladies talked about previously, you do have to be an assiduous marketer. But just because you're self-publishing and an agent or editor isn't going to let you in the door to success, doesn't mean you don't have to have an immaculate story. In fact, I think even more so, because your story is going straight to the reader. And increasingly, like I said previously, people are very discerning these days. And I think that they are quite demanding, and they'll put something down if it doesn't catch their interest. So that's definitely my goal with any story, is to make it the best story it's going to be, but also try to tailor it to be the best story it's going to be for that particular audience. It's not just existing in a void. It's in the context of who the ultimate reader is going to be. And sadly, in traditional publishing, that's an agent or editor, as representing the people who buy the books.
So what do you charge?
What do I charge? That's such a tricky question. And I know it's especially for women, it's very difficult to ask what we're worth. And I know all my friends that have been freelancers have said the same things. Every time I quote someone a price, no matter if it's my starting out prices or where I'm at today, I cringe when I hit the send button, and I won't do it on the phone, because I'm actually really bad with numbers. As good as I am with words, I'm horrible with numbers. And so I am always afraid that I'll mess something up. And so I never give quotes over the phone. I say, I'll follow up with an email for you, giving you a quote. With that said, there's a pretty wide range of rates. There is the editorial, it's EFA, but I can't remember what, the Editorial Freelancers Association, I believe, has a posted, and we can put it in the chat. They have a posted list of rates, and there's a range, obviously. I have heard, since the downturn of traditional publishing, that a lot of former big house publishers are now out on their own, basically doing the same thing I do. And I have heard that those people will charge upward of $50,000 for a manuscript. So every time I think about that, I feel like my rates are entirely reasonable. I think the range is so big, honestly, that I think you just need to talk to enough people to get an idea of what everyone charges and what their services are, because as far as I can tell, everyone does it a little bit differently. And so it really depends, just as your book is so individual to you and your working process is individual to you, so is your relationship with an editor. Or it should be. It's thank you, Sharon. I see that you sent the link. It should be similar to how the relationship with an agent would be for, or used to be for, a traditionally published author. It should be a relationship. I generally don't just do one-off jobs with my clients. I establish a working relationship with them for throughout one book, and then even on to the subsequent projects, if I'm lucky, if I deserve that, which so far I have, which is wonderful, huge compliment. So I really think that it depends, A, on your comfort level and your budget for what you can afford, and then B, what their services are, if that's what you're looking for, if they're offering something that you don't need or aren't looking for, and then also what the relationship is and what they bring to the table. So, you know, not everyone has the same, that's why I call myself, you'll see on my website, which I'll put in the chat too, a literary strategist, because I come to the table with all that background, and it is, I will be the first to admit it's rather limited in terms of self-publishing because I have been so steeped in the traditional world. And if someone is looking for someone that is very skilled with self-publishing and can aid them on that path, I will happily refer them to another colleague. We're all very collegial, for lack of a better word. So it really depends on what exactly you're looking for. I know I'm being cagey about the rates, but like I said, I've never gotten a strict answer on what my colleagues charge. I've heard of the 50,000 number, and I think last time I looked, that EFA guide was actually very accurate, although it is a wide range even then. So it just, yeah, it depends on your comfort level.
Now, I would imagine that if somebody wants to keep from spending 3 times what they're possibly going to earn on a book,
that's the issue,
to have you edit it, that it would help if the book were as clean, as perfect as possible beforehand. But also that the person understood how things work, because otherwise I would guess, and from some of the things over the years that you have said, I suspect that an awful lot of times when it comes to a new writer, that is someone with a first or even a 5th manuscript that they haven't actually been through the whole publication process yet, that if they don't know how things work, an awful lot of your hourly rate goes to the basics of stuff like, you know, what is character development? What is head jumping, point of view jumping?
Yeah.
I mean, why does it matter? What is an adjective? Why are adverbs bad? You know, a lot of those things are things that, you know, professionals, you and I have spent a lot of time learning that. There's nothing wrong with not knowing it. But if you don't know it, you have to go and do your homework before giving your manuscript to someone like Zoe Quinton to clean up, because it's not going to make any sense to you when she says your characters are head jumping in chapter 3. So where would you suggest that people start with their manuscript before they start paying money, before they start giving you money?
It's a really great point, because I make very clear to any prospective client, I'm not a writing coach. That's just, I barely have enough patience for my own children. I'm not a teacher for a reason. It's not my jam. Yes, Elmer Leonard and Stephen King also don't like adverbs. J.K. Rowling adores adverbs. That's all I'm going to say. I am not a writing coach, and that's just, it's not where my expertise lies. And as I've developed my practice, I've discovered that I much prefer to work with people who have been in the industry, whether or not they're published. They they know the shorthand. So I can say it slows down around 60% in Act 2, and you need to pick it up the pacing. And they don't say, I've had clients in the past say, oh, I get overwhelmed when you talk about the acts. And I'm like, what? So I think that's a great point, is that it's not a great use of our resources if I'm the one teaching you, and you're not going to be happy about it if I'm the one teaching you writing, because I'm not a very good teacher. That said, I do think there are, and I heard the ladies previously talking about this, there are so many books, there are so many wonderful books about writing out there. There are so many wonderful classes online right now. And what I think it requires is taking writing seriously, taking writing as a job or a degree that you're learning. This is something you do and you practice. And there are ways of doing it and there are ways of not doing it. Granted, everyone breaks the rules. That's the point of a rule, is that everyone can break them, but you do have to have, it's like Picasso, you have to have that classic understanding of what those rules are before you can start to paint outside of them or bend them. So I highly suggest, depending on, again, on your budget, starting with a good writing book, starting with, taking a class online, reading Jane Friedman's site, but also just reading and reading as deep as you can in your genre. So know everything that's been published in the last few years and the classics in your genre, and wide as well. Read something, and I'm guilty of this. I personally don't read romance. I don't have enough time to read for pleasure as it is, but I try to read a wide depth, even if I just read a portion, or wide breadth, of genres, even if it's just a portion of the book, because there's so much to learn from how people write. And then of course I go back to my old favorites and I reread those again, and I take notes in my head or on paper about what they do that works and doesn't work. So you can really teach yourself how to write better just by reading. In fact, one of the main questions I ask my clients when I'm onboarding them is, what are your favorite books in your genre? And not that I care. I mean, I'm not judging, I'm curious, but I more often than not can tell when a writer is committed, because a lot of times you would be amazed at how many times people can't name a book that they've read in their genre in the last 6 months, because they think, oh, writing is easy, writing is fun, I'm just going to go do this thing. And they don't actually read. It's not, I know that's a weird concept for probably most people here, but they don't read. And to me, that's a red flag of how seriously someone takes the craft, is that they're not willing to put in the time that it takes to learn on that deeper level.
I think that point that you made about, more or less about investing in your career. I mean, if you care about writing as in the long term, not just as, oh, I've got a book, I'd like to get it published, but I want to be a writer.
Yeah.
Then I think investing in books and tapes and online classes and things like the Book Passage Writing Conference, which is so very good and has been helpful in getting people published. I mean, that is an investment in what you want to do. And as such, it's not a hobby, it's, where you want to go.
Yeah.
And it's where you learn things like, what is point of view jumping?
There's a line, I think you really nailed it with that, Laurie. There's a line between hobbyists and writers. And again, the money has nothing to do with that. Publishing deals have nothing to do with that. Numbers when you self-publish, it's not that. It's the writing. It's the difference between someone who thinks it's going to be fun and then realizes how hard it is and is like, I'm good. That was not my jam. And then goes and starts something new. And someone who really has that commitment to turn it into a career and to learn and to be growing and have that curiosity about it.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Jane Friedman. And her newsletter, what is the name of her newsletter?
Hot sheet.
The hot sheet.
Mhm.
Now, is that the one that she charges for, or is that the free one?
Yes, that's the paid one. But it's not a ton. It's not a ton of money, and it's really worth the investment because her insights on the industry are absolutely priceless.
She also has a free one that drops into the mailbox.
That one I think is called Electric. I can't remember, but that one's more about digital stuff.
Yeah. But anyone who is interested in both the industry, and she has more to do with the industry than self-pub, but a lot of her stuff has to do with editing.
She also, she has a book that I highly recommend called The Business of Being a Writer. Which again, that kind of sums up, I think, the point that we were just making, is that you have to take it as a business and a job.
Now, there's also the publishers marketplace. Now, Claire, I'm not sure how much the discount is, but I know that for MWA members, you can get a discount, a considerable discount for publishers marketplace. What would you suggest would be valuable for self-pub writers in publishers marketplace? So, Zoe.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking to Claire.
No.
Okay.
What would you say is valuable about publishers marketplace?
And I was just noticing Betsy said that Jane's free newsletter lists lots of great writing webinars. So you can educate yourself in this way on a budget. It doesn't have to be a huge investment. You just have to choose wisely. Unfortunately, conferences tend to be expensive, but events like this one for MWA tend to be low to no cost other than the membership. So
and obviously high quality.
Super, the highest. And, obviously the highest ROI that you can ask for out there. Publishers marketplace, I tend to rely on them for clients that are looking for an agent, because you can find past deals and track records in publishers marketplace. You can look up an agent and see when their last deals were. If they haven't sold anything for a long time, then it's probably not a good fit. But they do have a ton of industry news on there, and they also have a free newsletter called Publishers Lunch that it reports a lesser amount of the deals. Like, I think you have to have the paid one to get the full deals of the day. And obviously, if you're self-publishing, you're not super worried about deals or, who's selling to whom, but it is a really great way of keeping an eye on the industry and seeing what's in demand and really setting that goalpost in terms of the market, because the business of being a writer applies in some ways even more to self-publishing. It depends on the genre. I know, there's it's complicated. The world of self-publishing has its own rhythms, but it is good to see what is trending. I hate to say, but what is going to sell, what is selling, and what's in the zeitgeist. It's good just to place yourself in that kind of rubric, I think, as a self-published writer.
Now, in the 10, 13, 12 minutes that are left to us here before we're going to go into questions. So anyone who has questions, if you put them in, we'll get to them. A couple of things that I'm interested in knowing what you think. There's a couple of different things when it comes to cleaning up a manuscript, and making it, as you said, this scrupulously finished manuscript. One of them just the sort of surface nuts and bolts, the punctuation, the spelling, the passive voice, that, all the things that you may not really notice because it's your own voice, but may be areas that you should improve just from a grammatical point of view. Now, I know that there's various programs like Grammarly out there. Would you recommend something like that for most people, or just the ones that are attached to Microsoft Word? Or I don't really know Scrivener, so I don't know what it has.
I'm not sure. I don't think Scrivener has a lot to offer on, and you guys please correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, but I don't think it has a lot to offer on top of Word in terms of grammar or spelling check. I don't remember it being that way. It's mostly just a different way of composing. I have used Grammarly. Now, granted, it was a few years ago, but I did get the subscription, the Premium Plus. And I found it really annoying because there was stuff that I would have to basically tell it to ignore that I thought was pretty basic. And it could have come further. I also used to hate Siri, and now I use it all the time. So it may have changed. Grammarly may have improved. Marilee says that she uses AutoCrit and likes it. So that said, I do think, and especially for self-publishing, that you need to have it be a clean manuscript. And like you just mentioned, you can't get it clean on your own. So not everyone has the resources to be able to afford a professional copy editor. And honestly, not everyone, professional copy editors don't catch everything. It's funny, when you were telling us earlier about the copy editor, about your lighting a match, my older son is in 6th grade and he's doing a report on Egypt, and he has a learning disability, so it's really awesome that he's doing so well. So the other day he had us come and read this report on one of the pharaohs, and it was a woman pharaoh. That's what it was. And it said in the middle of it, it said she had a governess named, and I don't remember the name, but it was a very British name, and it was in, I was like, wait a second, this pharaoh had a British governess for her children? And he goes, yeah, I found it online. And I said, what date was this? He didn't realize that I was going to copy edit his essay for him. I mean, they should be used to that by now. And he looks it up and it's like 13th century or 12th century. And I was like, I don't think there were a lot of British governesses running around. And he's like, no, it said it in the article. And I Googled it. And sure enough, for some reason, Encyclopedia Britannica and then Wikipedia had run together the articles for this pharaoh, this female pharaoh, and Queen Elizabeth, whose name, the name of whose governess he had put into his report.
Oh dear.
And he was like, but it said it in the piece. I read the whole, because I said, dude, you didn't read the whole thing. And he goes, I did. I got that from the article. So context matters. That's my point.
Context
Details matter.
Yeah.
And Grammarly can't catch stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, it's hard to say.
Now that kind of brings us to the other side of that, so that you can use Word's grammar check. You can even, I mean, there used to be a software that would trigger the repetition of words, so that if you're one of those people who uses very a lot, it would point out to you that you use it more often. I don't know if those are still available. It's the kind of program that comes and goes a lot. I find that reading aloud, reading the manuscript aloud catches that as well. So, but the other question is content. I mean, there's a lot of content that, like people using a match or inserting Queen Elizabeth into ancient Egypt. You have to have a set of outside eyes to say, I'm sure about that.
Wait a second.
So a lot of people who are, who are, especially who are doing self-pub, but even who are doing regular, traditional publishing, like to use beta readers for.
Mhm.
Now, I have a little group of beta readers that I have come to know and trust over the years, because I know that they don't get carried away and tell me that I should be doing this instead of that, because that's my job. They just tell me that elsewhere I've said this when it sort of disagrees. So that's what you need beta readers for, but also for things like, does it make sense? So if you have beta readers that you trust, not just your mom and, you know, somebody that is in your reading group and the rest of it.
Hey, I would trust my mom as a beta reader.
Yeah, don't. You really don't. But I mean, say something about beta readers as an editor. How do you value, how do you find, what do you use beta readers for?
You know, it's funny because often when I get a client who is talking about, well, my beta reader said this and my beta reader said that, my heart kind of drops, because what I find is that people aren't choosy enough and they just let anyone read their book and then they take anyone's advice. And at a certain point, there's just way too many cooks in the kitchen. And ultimately it's your story. It's your book. And my main objection to beta readers, and the reason I think you do need to be really careful with how many you choose and who they are, is it can really dilute. Yes, they can catch things. Yes, it's great to have an extra set of eyes on and opinions on your novel. But if you're not careful, it can really dilute your story. And you lose that drive and that creativity that you started with. And sometimes, honestly, that can take the spark out of it. So I recommend beta readers, but definitely be taken with a grain of salt. And definitely, if there's bigger things to change that they call out, to really sit with that and reconcile, is this part of, as you started with, Laurie, is this part of my overall goal for the book? Is this part of my end goal? Does this improve my abilities to get there, or is it changing the story too much? So definitely looking at their criticism critically and choosing really carefully what to apply and what to ignore. And in related news, really having a thick skin, because not everyone's going to like stuff. There's no one will ever, if you ask someone to be a beta reader, no one will ever give you a clean bill of health if they're, you know, worth their salt. So you really do need to be choosy. That said, I do think it can add a ton of value to a manuscript, especially those that are intended for self-publishing, because with self-publishing, your audience is the reader. It's going directly to the reader. You're not talking to some, you know, uppity up in New York in between. You're going directly to the reader. And so beta readers are very pertinent.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I used to find with, well, still do, that with my editor, if she catches something and says, I don't get this, my first impulse is to say, but I just explained it 3 pages before.
Right.
However, her job is to read.
Mm-hmm.
And if she didn't get it, nobody else will either.
Yes.
So it's not that I'm wrong. It's just that I need to take a reader into account. So if you have one beta reader that says, I don't get this character, that's one thing. If you have 3 beta readers that all say, I don't get this character, then it might be a thing that you need to work on polishing.
Corroborating and finding the places that they have feedback in common, rather than just trying to incorporate every piece of their feedback, I think is a good way forward.
Now, I have found, and one of the areas that an organization like MWA is extremely helpful is there's forums, there's community that you can write, so that, for example, the last novel I published was about a cold case investigator in the San Francisco Police Department. For that, not being myself a cold case investigator for the San Francisco Police Department, I needed to talk to cops, and I needed to talk specifically to cold case cops. And so I needed to find people who knew what they were talking about so that I didn't get it completely wrong. And I found that, having a community of people at my beck and call, I can send out a thing there saying, hey, does anybody know somebody who's working with cold case in San Francisco? And I get names. Some of them are too busy, obviously, but I'll find somebody who is willing to read not the whole manuscript, but the manuscript that specifically has to do with the cold case.
Yeah.
Or I wrote a book in which a car played a main section, and I found a guy who was an expert in that kind of car, and I could give him those sections and say, does this piece of the narrative make sense? So that kind of beta reader can be super valuable. One of the other things that I think has come up a lot in discussions especially about self-pub, because we don't have a whole wing like most of the big publishing houses have, is the question of sensitivity readers. Now, when I talk to my publisher about introducing an ethnic character, for example, which is something that is involved in the next book, one of the things that I immediately get back from them is, you got to be a little careful not to step on toes. And, I can say I'm fine because I know that, where I'm going is fine. But it's something that especially if you're doing YA, you've got to get it right.
Yep.
So how do I, as a writer of an 812-page cozy, how do I make sure that I'm not stepping on toes? And, I'm a white woman who lives in Santa Cruz. How do I write about a farm worker in Watsonville? How do I write about, someone who lives in the small city in southern Thailand? Where do I find sensitivity readers?
So I think, just to go back to your point that you just made, I think using forums like MWA to find people who will help you out in that sense is a really great resource. There are professional sensitivity readers that you can hire. And I think, especially if you're writing anything that may be, considered controversial or touchy, it's a good idea to hire a professional. But there's often, you can find colleagues to read it for you that have knowledge of that, subject or group, and someone will know someone who knows another person. Or I've heard, and I don't know if this is true, but I think you can find college students in like an English department or similar to do that for you. I'm not 100% sure of that. I'd have to verify, but
I will say that group that we mentioned earlier, the Editorial Freelancers Association, they have one of their lines on there is sensitivity, authenticity reads for $31 to $35 an hour. If you have something that you think might be touchy, it might be a good idea to put your book through just to make sure.
I really 100% can't agree with that more. It may even be more important than a copy editor, depending on what you're writing about. Just because we've seen how it blows up, like you said, in the YA area, especially, we've seen it blow up and go so badly. So it's just better to cover that base.
Yeah. Or not write it.
Yes. There's that choice.
Were there any points that we had meant to cover that we didn't? I think that I've marked off my bits on my page.
No, I think that was it. I covered my notes that I was thinking of too.
And Claire, were there any other questions that came up?
No. I think
It all.
I would kind of like to open it up and have, if I could, I don't even know how I can. I'll start video. Okay, there we go. Start video. I'm just embodied voice. And then, well, let me start my video. Okay, there we are.
There we are.
No, I think, well, we covered a lot of questions about the process of publishing your own material as an independent publisher. I would like people in the audience to, if you can put things in the chat, that would be great. I do think that one of the caveats that I would say about these grammar programs is that, you know, the algorithms are pretty good. But what my caveat would be is that I find that they tend to strip out voice.
Yeah.
And because it's geared towards business writing, right? I mean, so it is geared towards business writing. It's not geared towards fiction writing. And that it does tend to strip out voice so that, and for me, when I pick up a book, you can always fix plot. What characters harder, voice, if the voice isn't there, then the book isn't unique.
Yeah.
And so that is, you know, I mean, I don't know how you feel, either you or Zoe feel about that, but I find that some of these programs they don't think about voice because they can't. That's not their function.
And that's not their job. I mean, their job is, strictly speaking, copy editing stuff. And I always treat the copy editor, I mean, some of the stuff that they give is substantial and thematic and you need to pay attention to. Others is, this is a grammatic irregularity, and I will read and check, and normally I'll just stet, which means no, I want it like it is. And that's how I tend to treat those Grammarly things. I mean, they're great because every so often you've done a typo and it's,
oh yeah, and or you know, you didn't finish off a sentence, you know, you left the, you know, that kind of thing. It's great at, and that's a really easy thing to do because, you know, our brains at a certain point shut off and say, oh, I am so sick of dialogue. And it's just like, you don't put that, you know, the curtain cues in where you should. But I also, this is so hard when you guys were talking about the issue of you know, of becoming a writer and how you can distinguish from how you become enough of a self-editor so that you know when something isn't working and something is working. And I have found it so valuable, Zoe, your suggestion about reading and seeing and taking a book and tearing it apart. And of course, and I don't know if this has been your experience, Laurie, I wouldn't be surprised if it was, that now that I am so much more critical about my own writing, I don't enjoy reading as much. And when something is a good book, it's a really good book. But it is, I can't help but tear it apart. And I think that's sort of part of the whole process, and that you learn how language should work, and books that you think, wow, this shouldn't work. And then they do, the rule breakers.
Yes.
And because, you know, they understand how language works. And it's, I think, really hard for people, especially in this publishing climate, about not getting discouraged when their book doesn't sell, or someone reads it and says, you know, this isn't very good. And I mean, can you address the issue of discouragement and understanding that this is a long process, or hopefully it's a long process, or maybe you're just a writer and you come out of the gate, you know?
It's funny because I tend to be, well, first of all, to address your issue of not being able to read books for enjoyment, I cannot watch TV or movies anymore. My husband, it drives him crazy because we'll be 10 minutes into something and I'll be on my phone because I'll see something or the dialogue will be off or just any little thing, and I'm out of it. I'm out of the story and then I'm over it. Books, I don't usually have time to read, but when I do find one that I like, I'll still devour it, and that's a rare pleasure. In terms of discouragement, it's funny because I end up being kind of a cheerleader for my clients, and I call myself a book therapist because it's such a personal, or sometimes I liken it to being a judge at a child beauty contest, because you're the one that has to tell someone, like, I'm really sorry, I know you think your kid is the cutest and they're just not. Like, they have like a wart right here and their ears are kind of funny.
Yeah.
So like you have to have so much tact and sensitivity around that. And I have worked so hard to give feedback in a very sensitive and encouraging way. And to really listen to people and find out where they're stuck and help them move through those places. And then sometimes just be like, yeah, it sucks. Like I just took a hiatus from taking new clients myself because I felt so discouraged about seeing amazing clients that I knew had an amazing story, just not have any doors open to them. And I had a dark night of the soul myself. Like, what the heck are we doing? You know, I lost my passion for a while and had to take a step back. So yeah, it happens. Like, it is discouraging, and I have to have that positivity to bring to my clients. So, you know, but in the end, like I said about beta readers, it's your story. It's your story. And hey, if you've written an 812-page cozy, you wrote it, man. That is amazing. I can't write. People ask me if I write myself all the time, and I'm like, hell no, it's too hard. It's really difficult to write. And so if you completed that 812-page cozy, kudos to you, even if no one else ever reads it. Good job.
Well, and also, I mean, this is something that people don't realize when you're juggling, you know, you're juggling voice, you're juggling character, you're juggling thought, you're juggling tension, you're juggling humor, sometimes you're juggling violence. Fitting all these parts together is tough. This isn't for the faint-hearted. It's really hard to create a coherent narrative when you've got all these balls in the air and you don't want any of them to drop. And so, you know, writing is hard, and you have to. I personally found that I almost have to leave my ego out of it, and you know that because otherwise, you know, I wouldn't keep doing this because it can be too hard. But it's just like, leave the ego at the door. What are you doing here? You know, what are you trying to do?
Somewhat of a glutton for punishment.
Yeah.
Laurie, I believe that's Laurie Sheehan asked, Zoe mentioned asking new clients about their favorite authors and their genre. Do you also ask them if they have comps for their book? Excellent question. Comps is competitors or comparable books. So it's basically, it's where your book would be shelved if it's on a bookshelf in a store.
If you like X, you'll love Laurie King.
Yeah. P.S. Don't say Harry Potter or Gone Girl. Because of course everyone wants to use that as a comp. Yes, I do generally ask new clients about comps because that tells me a lot about how they perceive their story and what their goals are. And that's an excellent point, because another thing we didn't talk about is how you vet a potential editor. And that's one way of seeing if they know their stuff. If you say, I think these are my comps, and they have a blank face or silence, it's they probably don't know their stuff.
Or your field.
Yeah, it's not
if someone came to me with a romance and said these are my comps, I'd be like, sweet, okay, like I don't know how those are done. You know, a mystery writer, I would know immediately what the comps were. So I think that's a really good way of vetting an editor and of describing what your end goal is to an editor, is to present those comps.
Well, because also from what I understand, you know, the editor has to fight for this book, right? And so if they don't understand the genre, if they don't understand the comps, then how are they going to go, you know, they're going into a knife fight with a teaspoon, right? Because they've got to be able to convince the marketing department that, you know, this is going to sell, this is great, this is on market, this is on target.
Yeah.
And if it's someone who has never heard of J.K. Rowling and you're writing a book about a magical wizard, then, you know, I know, the stranger things, but your editor is I mean, there should be, I think, you're a champion for the writer, and you need champions along all the way to bring
Yes.
this book to fruition.
Yeah.
And
Emily Nickel says, separating the technical aspect of writing from the art of it is one of my biggest struggles. It's easy to become distracted by the technical work. Spending time with the plot and characters in my head is easy. Wrangling them on a page is incredibly hard. I think one of the things that is difficult when you have your first book that you're finished and you're working on rewriting is that you tend to fixate on that book. One of the advantages of being in the traditional publishing mode is that you're always off on the next book, and you're allowed to put the other one behind you, so that one of the things that I find really necessary for a rewrite is to put some time and space. So when you finish a first draft, don't start your first draft when you finish it. Put it aside, because when you come back to it with a really cold eye, you can fall in love with it again, or you can start to see its problems. But at any rate, you see what it's really there, rather than worrying about, all the, as you say, Emily, the technical side of it. You've struggled with the plot, you've fixed this, the subplot and the characters and the motivations and the way they tie together and all the rest of it. If you just put it aside for a month and come back to it, having done other things in between, you can then get an idea of what you actually have there. And as I said, see if you can fall in love with it again.
And I think also that goes back to your original question to me, Laurie, which was, how can I be ready for an editor? And that's the number one way that I would say you can get your manuscript ready for an editor is, I'm great when you're at the point where you're like, if I look at my manuscript one more time, I'm going to scream. But, and that's what I always tell people. People are like, when do I know to hire an editor? And that's what I tell them is when you're going to scream. But another way of accomplishing more or less the same thing is to put it aside and come back to it with fresh eyes. And sometimes that's enough that you can see the issues that are there and work through some of them. And that, again, saves you a lot of time and money with a professional editor.
And quite often, especially if it's like a series, and so you're writing the same character, but in a completely different situation, sometimes that then opens your eyes to what maybe was going wrong with the first one.
Yeah, there's a lack of development there that maybe you can't carry over into a second book, where you feel you hadn't fleshed it out enough. And then you'll find in the second book, oh, wait a minute, I need my character to do this, but it doesn't make sense how I've written them in book one for them to lead to book two.
I had one client, I think last year, who hired me because she had self-published, I think it was a series, and it was fantasy, and it had done really well. And she was several books in and then realized that she didn't like her first book anymore. And so we did because she's like, I've learned so much just by writing these books. We actually did a reissue. And so she hired me, and then, I kind of worked with her through this already published book. And that's the beauty of self-publishing, is that you can reissue books. You can make changes and say, hey, there's an updated version for 99 cents or whatever. Claire, I really appreciate your co-pilot there.
Oh, yeah. He's almost 13.
I was going to say, he's not a young pup.
No, he'll be 13 in March, and we're kind of.
He's so sweet. I like his
I know. Well, he's got that white muscle, that he's like the best dog ever born. There's going to be like state funeral when he goes. He's like the
Aw.
dog that everybody loves in the neighborhood. That people stop me on the street. How's Bear? It's like,
Oh.
they don't care about me. No, they care about the dog. So yeah,
He's a little celebrity, I can tell.
he is actually a little in the neighborhood. He's a total celebrity. So
Love that.
he's not a writer though, but
No,
he does support me. I'm here,
no, moral support.
and he's snuffling on the carpet, and
Yeah,
yeah.
moral support is important. Usually my cat is somewhere around me. I don't know where she
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. So what do you see as trends? We have a few minutes. What do you see as trends, Zoe? I mean, do you see any trends, or it's just people are just writing their little butts off?
It's interesting because I definitely see trends in storytelling, but I think the best place to see trends is actually in what's happening on TV and movies. And then just keeping an eye on that stuff, and eventually it trickles into books, and sometimes it's vice versa. But of course, I now can't think of any just off the top of my head.
Well, I'm actually not a TV watcher, but my husband is it's like his third arm, and he writes a lot of things. He watches a lot of shows that he tells me about endlessly, and what seems to be a theme here is the very unlikable scenario. He'll tell me the plots of these shows, and I'm like, every person sounds horrific. Why are you watching this? Why are you watching
That was big for a while. So like I would say Gone Girl again is,
well, that was
I ate it up, and then I talked to Laurie about it, and she's like, I didn't care what happened to about a single one of those people.
No.
All of them are despicable. All of them, there's nothing human about any of them. So
I completely agree. And yet
that was big for a while, for sure. It may still be. And I think that we're past the unreliable female narrator.
Right. But just not unlike, I mean, that was a different twist. I mean, because she was unreliable, but we didn't know that. So, kudos for that sort of plot twist. Yeah. But we're just talking about unlikable people. We're just, and I don't know how that translates to books, because I mean, I'm like Laurie, I have to identify on some level. They don't have to be necessarily nice, but we're talking about completely unredeemable people. Like, like Succession. Nobody in that show expects me, I mean, I haven't watched it. My husband describes it to me. It's like, these are horrible people. And he's like, yeah, they're all horrible people.
I watched half an episode and I was like, I don't care. I don't
want to spend my time with these people?
No.
And is does that translate, is that translating into books? Are we gonna, is that a trend that we're gonna see where everybody is kind of horrible and mean and vindictive and greedy? And I don't know, because those are really popular. I mean, they're popular.
I know the trend that I was thinking of in movies and books is Agatha Christie. Everyone seems to be retelling Agatha Christie right now, and stories inspired by Agatha Christie. She's having a huge resurgence. So what made me think of it is that I find often all of her characters are completely despicable, especially like the ones in the set piece where someone dies and they're all suspects. I'm like, I hate every single one of you. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
Why should I read this? I don't care.
Yeah, I think that the sort of cerebral whodunit is having a resurgence with the Knives Out and Glass Onion thing. But one of the things I will say that I've seen over the last 2 or 3 years that I think is just really great is the variety of voices we're hearing from now. I mean,
I hope that's not just a trend, though.
Well, I kind of expected it to just sort of be this brief 1 year, plunge of the publishing houses, showing how woke they were, and back into this at once. But, it's just been a joy to see the number of people who get nominated for prizes, who are writing about Ghana and American Indian reservation life. And, I mean, people that we wouldn't have heard from in traditional publishing, 10 years ago.
Yeah, I agree.
And they're all over. When someone hits it big, it's not just sort of big, it's
Right.
large. And it's just been a joy to see things open up to some extent. And obviously they have a ways to go, but I am pleased to see a variety of faces and voices out there at the moment.
And younger people too. I mean, that's been my experience at conferences, is that you're seeing a bunch of younger authors showing up. And I think that diversity of voices and people seeing this as a career at a younger age is amazing, because I think it's just not modeled. It's just, for people of color in general, and also for younger people. I don't think people talk about, oh, you can be a novelist, you can tell stories for a living. It's still just not really out there.
Oh, one thing I wanted to say when we were talking about publishing, I should have mentioned this earlier, but I noticed this attending the Edgars last year, was that I could tell who was going to win the Edgar Award based on the cover.
Mm-hmm.
And so
100%.
I think it every except for once, which was the Edgar for Best Novel, because I thought the cover for 5 Decembers was abominable. It was a horrible, cheesy, awful cover, and yet it won, and it should have. It was a wonderful book. But so, I mean, I think people, when you think about book covers, it matters. And I'm not a terribly visual person, but obviously it matters. I could tell which book was going to win just based on the cover, because they had this montage of all the covers of the books, and I'm like, that one, it was cover art matters.
Yeah.
And I think because we deal with words, we might dismiss that more than we should.
Michelle, I believe, I'm sorry if I said that wrong. Michelle just pointed out the TV series, The Extraordinary Attorney Wu. I haven't watched it myself, but a number of people have recommended it to me. It's about a young woman who's on the spectrum, and that, to build on Laurie's point a minute ago, I really appreciate that inclusion from a storytelling perspective, of people that are neurodivergent. And I think that offers so many different possibilities for storytelling, because my favorite stories are the ones where it's the world as it is, but one thing is different. So usually that's speculative fiction. But if it's the person who's seeing the world that sees it just a little bit differently, how does that change the story? And I think that's a beautiful way of telling a story. And I love to see that multiplicity of voices also coming out and being, and then, Betsy said that there's a PBS show called Astrid, about a woman on a spectrum who solves murders. And I think that's a wonderful thing to be seeing as a trend as well. And I hope these aren't trends. I hope they stick around and those voices continue to be heard in perpetuity.
I mean, but isn't, the success of a book is it makes you see something in a different way.
Yes.
And, and this is just takes it one step further, where the protagonist is also seen. It's not the writer isn't making people see it in a different way.
Yes.
It's not as passive. It's like thinking of the Rosie Project, where, guy, was strange and different, and it made you see the world as he sees it, and in a very, very different and touching way. And
that it can be a gift. It doesn't have to be a disability. It's a gift.
Right.
It's a different way of seeing the world. And so, like, someone solving murders because of the way how they see the world, that's a beautiful way of claiming that. Sherlock Holmes. Yeah, completely.
Talk about neurodivergent.
I know.
Yeah. The original, the OG.
Yeah, we're the world is coming full circle here. That just
So
comes.
if anyone has anything that they particularly would recommend that anyone interested in self-pub should know about, like the Jane Friedman thing, and there was somebody posted a thing about a women's, where is that? I can't remember.
Astrid, Women on the Spectrum Who Solves Murders.
No, women in publishing. Betsy Barker said.
Oh,
Women in
yeah,
Publishing
right.
Virtual Summit. Anything along those lines that you think your fellow self-pub writers would be interested in, just post it in the, and you don't have to put a link if they can find it by name, but just post it in the comments. And I would again suggest the Book Passage Writing Conference in August.
Thumbs up. Thumbs up. That's a great resource.
They have a fabulous track record. If you're interested in traditional publishing, they have a very good track record in getting people published. But they are also very, very good for
helping
you make a manuscript that can be self-published. So
yeah,
And
I may be there and Zoe may be there. I don't know.
oh
VoucherCon is in San Diego this year too.
yeah, that's
So-
local.
And again, that does tend to be more traditional, but there's a ton of stuff in terms of craft and, just learning from peers and meeting other book-minded people. I think it's invaluable for that.
It's community overload in the best possible way.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. I really appreciate your words of wisdom, and like, it is a community, it takes a village. And can I say thank you so much for your time? I do appreciate, I know you're both very busy, and hope, we can do some more like this to help people onward with
That's
their
a
words.
Today I wrote 1,100 words and I did this thing. So
Oh, no, now you're making me feel bad. I didn't write any words. I didn't write any words. Yes. Anyway, thank you very much, and take care.
And I just threw my website and email in the chat.
Yes.
If anyone's interested, because normally I give out my business card. So there you go.
Yeah, and I have to put a plug in for Zoe, because she looked at, I mean, you really are really great at what you do.
Thank you. Claire, I really appreciate that.
It was,
Thank you.
I gained a lot of insight, and you were very, very helpful and exceptionally professional.
and with thanks to Mystery Writers of America and North Chapter.
Yes, join.
Thank you for hosting us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right.
Talk to everybody later.
Everyone, thank you.
Larry, you'll have to sign off on Zoom.
I know, okay. I'm trying to end here.
I think, are you just waiting for everyone to disappear?
I think so, but also I want to thank both of you very much.
Thank you so much, Laurie and Glenda and Claire.
Yeah, thank you.
LRK.
It really does take a village, and I do appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to, I